Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Old Wolverine, do whatever he wants. Chapter 21. Logan stared at the message on his phone and typed, "What are you going to do?" Over the years, he has received many customers, some of whom are careless and forget things in the car, and only send messages to ask about the whereabouts of the things afterwards. Although Logan has not started work these days, it is not ruled out that some people only realize that they lost something now. Soon, the other party replied, "I hope you can help me send someone." Logan was stunned. San Antonio is not short of Uber drivers. He has been in the industry for so many years, but this is the first time someone has asked for his own car. Thinking about it, Logan refused and said, "Sorry, I have left the Uber driver industry. If you need it, you can ask for someone else." However, as soon as the message was sent, the other party quickly replied, "Wolverine, please, I have no other way now, I can only ask for your help, no one else can protect her safety." Looking at the three words Wolverine, Logan's pupils shrank sharply. The other party knew his identity. Although many people know the name of Wolverine, it was even adapted into various children's comics at one time. But now there are very few people who can find him and recognize his identity. Logan looked serious and quickly typed and asked, "Who are you?" The purpose of the other party looking for him, Logan must figure it out, otherwise it may lead to greater danger. "My name is Gabriella, and I am a nurse." The other party typed a response. Judging from the speed of the response, the other party seemed very anxious. "I have a child named Lola by my side. She urgently needs to go to North Dakota and needs your help. Please, otherwise she will be in danger. Please help us." Lola. Logan was stunned, and his brain was in a trance. The vague memory hidden in the depths of his mind for a long time was gradually awakened because of this familiar name. After a while, Logan came back to his senses. He remembered some details of the story of Uncle Wolf in his old age before crossing. Now he has a daughter in this world named Lola Ginny. Of course, many people may feel unfamiliar with this name, and most people prefer to call her X-23. Although Laura is nominally his daughter, she is not his biological child. She is a new generation of mutants created by Dr. Rice in the mutant experimental base by combining Logan's genes with some bad means. And X-23 is her number in the laboratory, and Laura Ginny is the name given by the nurse who takes care of her. "I didn't expect Gabriella to bring Laura here so soon," Logan murmured to himself in a low voice. Knowing the plot of Uncle Wolf's Twilight Years, he was not surprised by Laura's appearance. And he also knew that if Laura's problem was not properly handled, he, the professor, and Caliban would all be implicated and die in this war of alternation between the old and the new. At this time, Logan suddenly realized that since Gabriella appeared in Santa Fe with Laura, Donald Beers might also be there. In an instant, Logan realized the seriousness of the matter. Donald Pierce is a hunter who specializes in helping the laboratory capture mutants. He has a powerful mercenary group, various heavy weapons, and even armed helicopters. He even has the highest authorization from the government. As long as his mission is to capture mutants, his armed helicopters can freely travel in various regions of the United States. This is definitely a very dangerous enemy. Just as Logan was thinking, his phone vibrated again, and Gavlev's message came again. "Logan, time is running out, we need your help." Looking at the text message on the phone, Logan quickly replied, "Don't worry, I will be responsible for helping to escort Lola, but not now. You must take Lola to hide. Donald is looking for people all over the city now, and any movement may attract his attention. I can't meet you at such a dangerous time. I will contact you when I have the chance." If he didn't know Lola's identity, Logan would definitely not agree so hastily. But since he knew that Lola was his daughter, Logan couldn't just sit back and watch, even if her appearance was not his wish. But she does have her own genes, and Logan knows the importance of the new mutants to the tribe and to his future planning and development. But now is not a good time to meet. Donald's power is stronger than they thought. He has many ways to get information, and he may even cooperate with the government. If he comes to Santa Fe, he may know that Wolverine is here. This is very dangerous for Logan and Professor X. Gabriella seemed a little surprised to see Logan's decisive agreement. After waiting for a long time, she replied, "We are hiding in a motel outside Santa Fe. It is safe for the time being." She thought it would be a difficult process to beg Logan for help. And Logan's straightforward agreement made her a little surprised for a while, and she couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Logan replied, "You must be careful, don't go out unless necessary, and I will contact you when the time is right." After replying, Logan turned off the screen of his mobile phone and threw it on the bedside. Too many things happened today: Chris's threats, Laura's requests for help, and Donald in the dark. Logan had to deal with each one carefully. The confusion in his heart made Logan take out a cigarette from the cigarette box on the bedside and light it. The scarlet flame was very eye-catching in the room. Logan held the cigarette in his mouth with a serious look. "What should I do now?" In the smoke, Logan murmured to himself. The appearance of Gabriella undoubtedly disrupted all his plans. Originally, he only needed to deal with the Lawrence family. Although it was a bit difficult, he was still confident that he could handle it. After all, the awakening of the new ability gave him hope that the self-healing factor could be repaired. When he fully recovered, the threat of a local Chable family would not be too great for him. But now, in addition to the Lawrence family, there is also Donald, the insidious and cunning guy. This put Logan in a desperate situation for a while. At this moment, the phone made a crisp sound again. "Chris, James, no, Logan, I hope I didn't disturb you, but there is one thing I forgot to say just now. You know the Lawrence family's manor, right? If you don't know it, you can ask someone. I believe most people know its address. I mean, you need to come over tomorrow. How about 11 o'clock in the morning? I will send someone to wait for you at the door." Quote. Logan looked at the text message sent by Chris and was a little surprised for a while, not understanding what this guy was going to do. But now that he has a handle in his hand, Logan really can't refuse his invitation. And the Lawrence family is not calm tonight. The arrival of the two distinguished guests has to let Mr. Lawrence and Chris, one of the richest businessmen in Santa Fe City, come out to receive them together. "Welcome, Dr. Rice, Mr. Donald." Quote. In the reception room of Lawrence Manor, Chris came forward and hugged the two of them warmly. Mr. Lawrence and Dr. Rice had worked together before, so they were not strangers to each other. Chris invited them to take a seat, and after the servants served tea, Lawrence dispersed all the servants, leaving only 4 of them in the magnificent hall. "I heard that Dr. Raya's work is not idle. Now he comes to Santa Fe City. I guess it should be for Wolverine." Lawrence sat on the soft sofa, holding a valuable cigar in his hand, squinting at Rice opposite. Rice, who originally wanted to drink tea, was stunned, raised his head suddenly, and said in surprise, "You mean Logan Howlett is also in Santa Fe City?" Hearing this question, Lawrence and Chris were stunned, and then laughed. "It seems that I guessed wrong, but Wolverine is indeed stationed in Santa Fe City. We just met a few days ago. His condition is not very good, just like a dying old wolf." Quote. Donald played with his mechanical arm and sneered, "We are here for a little guy, that is a new product in our laboratory." After a pause, Donald also reacted and turned to Rice and said, "Doctor, it seems that Gabriella may have known that Wolverine is here through some special channels, and came here specifically to seek Wolverine's help. After all, the little guy has Wolverine's genes." "I think so. I originally wanted to ask the Lawrence family to help search for the little guy, but it seems that it is not necessary now. Keep an eye on Wolverine, and maybe you can find the location of the little guy soon." Dr. Rice nodded. He told Donald, "You go to ask Wolverine, it would be best if you can ask. If not, don't worry, we may be able to lead the little guy out through him." Chris waved his hand and said, "No need to bother, I have notified him, he will be here tomorrow." This made Rice stunned. "Is he willing to obey your orders?" Quote. Rice hated Logan, but he also knew Logan well. That guy would not willingly obey orders from others. Chris smiled sinisterly. "We have leverage over him. He dare not disobey." Lawrence narrowed his eyes and interrupted, "Dr. Rice, I hope you won't make things too difficult for that guy when he comes tomorrow. After all, that guy is a good tool. He can help us solve a lot of problems." Dr. Rice laughed. "Of course, our current target is only that little guy. As for Wolverine, you can keep him for now. In his opinion, the greatest value of an excellent mutant is lying on a cold bed in the laboratory. For Mr. Science, for Mr. Humanity, squeeze out the last remaining value." The manor of the Lawrence family is located in the most luxurious wealthy area of Santa Fe. Those who can live here are the richest businessmen in the entire Santa Fe city, and ordinary people can't set foot here at all. The manor of the Lawrence family is the center of the wealthy area. From a distance, it looks like a gorgeous castle. Led by the servant, Logan successfully entered this luxurious manor. There are forests in the manor, and there are even a few ancient trees that look hundreds of years old. These forests are carefully trimmed by gardeners every day. The lush forests are neat and tidy, without any abrupt places. The air here is extremely fresh. It is hard to imagine that in this desert, there can be such fresh air. Logan followed the servant, and adjusted his wrinkled cheap suit a little restrainedly, trying to make himself look not so out of place. After all, compared with the Lawrence family's manor, the abandoned factory where he lived was simply a garbage dump. Even the attendant who led the way, wearing a uniform tailcoat, looked more expensive than his cheap suit. "Mr. James, Master Chris is waiting for you upstairs." The attendant took Logan into a palace-like residence. The magnificent house, any simple-looking decoration, was enough to replace an ordinary person's annual salary. The spiral staircase leading to the second floor, the handrails were even all plated with real gold, and it was extremely dazzling under the reflection of natural light. The attendant took Logan upstairs and knocked gently on the door outside a room. "Master Chris, Mr. James is here." After saying that, without waiting for a response from inside, the attendant turned and went downstairs, and before leaving, he signaled Logan to push the door and enter. Logan also opened the door and entered the office. Although it is called an office, its area is larger than a standard basketball court. The side with good lighting is all decorated with floor-to-ceiling windows, and you can clearly see the blue sky and white clouds outside at a glance. The office was carefully decorated. Any of the paintings on the wall could be auctioned for tens of millions of dollars. The youngest items in the collection display cabinets date back to the first Industrial Revolution. On the leather sofa in the office, Chris, who was drinking tea, saw Logan and greeted him with a smile. "Logan, I'm glad you're on time." Logan nodded, and at the same time looked at the other person sitting on the sofa opposite Chris. His face suddenly stiffened. Chris hurriedly introduced with a smile, "This is my guest today, Mr. Donald Pierce. By the way, he is a die-hard fan of Wolverine. You may have a lot of common topics. When I was a child, I often listened to the stories of Wolverine and X-Men. I have a special liking for the stories of superheroes." Donald smiled and stood up, extending his hand to Logan enthusiastically. Logan stared at Donald, scanned the office, and after making sure that there were no fully armed guys hiding in the office, he shook hands with him politely. Compared with Donald's smiling face, Logan's expression was slightly bleak. He didn't expect that Donald would go directly to the Lawrence family and even arrange for him to meet with them. Chris looked at the two shaking hands, still smiling. "I suddenly remembered that I still have some things to deal with. Logan, I hope you can have a good chat with Mr. Donald." After that, Chris got up and left the office. Donald sat back in his original seat and warmly invited Logan to sit down. "I heard from Mr. Chris that you were an Uber driver before." Donald used his mechanical arm to play with a teacup in front of him, while squinting at Logan. "I'm just looking for a Mexican woman with a little girl. I wonder if you have received them." Logan knew that he was asking about Laura, and immediately shook his head decisively. "I haven't seen them." Donald was not surprised by Logan's reply, and continued, "The Mexican woman's name is Gabriella." Logan's expression was still indifferent. "I haven't heard of it." Although he had just texted Gabriella last night, Logan knew that if he admitted it at this time, it would definitely bring some unnecessary trouble. Donald smiled and shook his head, picked up the teacup and took a sip, but his eyes were fixed on Logan. Although Logan acted very calm, Donald did not believe his words. He understood that the only person Gabriella would contact when he came to Santa Fe City was Wolverine. After all, Laura had Wolverine's genes. If there was anyone who was capable and would help her, there was only Wolverine. But Logan insisted that he didn't know him, and Donald had no choice. This was not the time to confront Logan head-on. After all, they still had to rely on each other to lure Laura out. After drinking the tea in the teacup, Donald stopped asking questions and stood up and handed Logan a business card. "I think you have met too many customers and can't remember them all at once. I hope you can remember them well later." If you remember the information of the Mexican woman and the child, you can call me at any time. As he said that, he showed a warm smile on his face. Don't worry, Mr. Logan's work will not be in vain. The little girl is very important to us. If you tell us about her, we will provide you with a generous reward. Logan took the business card, glanced at it briefly, nodded, and put it in his pocket. Donald smiled happily and turned to leave the office. Logan looked at Donald's back and sat on the sofa with a gloomy face. It seems that the Lawrence family and Donald have at least a cooperative relationship on the surface, which is not a good thing for him. It seems that you had a good chat. Chris suddenly pushed the door open and looked at Logan with a smile. Why tell him? I'm in Santa Fe City. You should know that he is a hunter in the mutant laboratory. Logan looked at Chris coldly, and he was full of anger at the backstab of the Lawrence family. Although he knew that Donald would definitely find someone to find out his whereabouts, he didn't expect that the Lawrence family would betray him so easily. Mr. Donald works for Dr. Rice, who is the top biologist in the United States. Chris did not respond to Logan's question directly, and said to himself, having a good relationship with him will be of great benefit to the family. They are not good people. If something unexpected happens, they will abandon you at any time. Logan was not warning with good intentions, but was worried that the Lawrence family had too deep cooperation with Donald's group, which would be disadvantageous to him. And he remembered that Dr. Rice had participated in the research on genetically modified food for mutants. This guy is the #1 anti-fan of mutants. To be honest, if there is a chance, Logan will choose to kill Rice. You don't need to worry about this kind of thing. As long as you work for Lawrence, no one will hurt you. Chris still smiled, turned around and walked to the desk, carefully picking up a porcelain bowl on the table. Do you know this? Look how beautiful it is. It is simply an unparalleled craft in human history. It is hard to imagine how such a perfect treasure could be made in the East more than 1,000 years ago. Chris looked at the porcelain bowl, his eyes were intoxicated. Tang Sankai. Logan glanced at the porcelain bowl. He didn't know much about antiques, but the standard white, green and yellow mixed colors of the porcelain bowl allowed him to tell the variety of the porcelain bowl. After all, he was from China before crossing. That's right. Chris carefully put down the porcelain bowl and exclaimed, the treasures left by the Oriental country that calls itself Tang simply fascinate everyone. Just say it. Logan didn't want to continue the topic of antiques. He didn't believe that Chris was just showing off his collection. Chris smiled lightly. Remember the gang of robbers you encountered when you and Samuel went to Nevada last time? You killed 10 of them by yourself. Logan didn't respond, just quietly waiting for Chris's next words. Chris suddenly put away his smile and said in a deep voice, they are not ordinary gang members, but members of the Juarez family. Maybe you don't know that the Juarez family and our Chris family have always been mortal enemies. At least since my great-grandfather's generation, there has been a fight between the two sides. At that time, it was popular to fight with revolvers. You want me to kill the Juarez family? Logan asked with a gloomy face, then you think too highly of me. Now he doesn't have the strength to confront a big family head-on. No, no, no. Chris shook his head repeatedly and continued to talk to himself. Most of the Juarez family's industries are smuggling businesses. Recently, I got news that they have a batch of antique ceramics to be smuggled in from the port of New York. That is a batch of coveted wealth. You want me to intercept the goods? Logan immediately understood, and also understood Chris's intention to arrange for him to meet with Donald today. He wanted to tell himself that if he didn't agree, they would let Donald do it to him at any time. It's always so pleasant to chat with smart people. Chris smiled and looked at Logan, looking at the porcelain bowl. Look, how beautiful it is. There are countless treasures as beautiful as it in that batch of goods. Logan did not respond, but just looked down at the porcelain bowl, and found that Chris's love for the porcelain bowl seemed to be just a simple pretense, and he didn't even know that it was tilted. Logan reached out and wanted to put the porcelain bowl straight. However, just as his hand was halfway extended, Chris slapped it away in disgust. Don't touch it. Meprisable. Logan's face darkened, but he recovered in an instant, retracted his palm, and whispered, sorry. Chris stopped talking nonsense, stared at the porcelain bowl, and said sternly, go back and pack up, we will leave tonight, it's a big deal, I don't want to see any accidents. Logan nodded, turned and walked out of the office, and as the office door closed, his expression instantly became cold. Chris may not know that Logan, as a Canadian, knows a few words of French. And Logan knows that the word he just said means cheap in French. New York. Logan never thought that he would return to this city in his lifetime. He had too many memories of this place, Xavier's School of Geniuses, X-Men, Scott, Jean, Beast, and the faces of old friends passing by on the familiar streets emerged in his mind. Now that he has set foot in this city again, he has mixed feelings, and he is also worried that he will be recognized. After all, his photo when he was young is still on the wanted poster, and those guys have noses as sharp as dogs. Fortunately, for this mission, the Lawrence family has made sufficient preparations, cleared all the checkpoints, and entered New York City easily without any inspection. Big cities are different. In the driver's seat, Samuel looked at New York City in amazement. This time, Logan was not alone in the mission, but combined with the previous team to act together. In addition to Samuel driving and Logan in the co-pilot seat, Conrad and Josh were also sitting in the back seat of the car. As one of the 4 major financial centers in the world, New York is prosperous. There are tall buildings everywhere. Most of the people walking on the busy streets are successful people in suits. There are too many luxury cars and sports cars on the main roads, and there are countless luxury stores. It seems that the air is full of the smell of money. It was evening when they entered New York. The streets were bustling, and the influence of the Avengers was unprecedentedly strong here. The posters of the Avengers were constantly scrolling on the big screens in major business districts, and the interface was full of Avengers peripheral toys. The posters of Captain America holding a vibranium round shield were almost all over the streets and alleys. Children were happily holding the Hulk doll, the sci-fi helmet of Iron Man, and the hammer toy of Thor, etc. The Avengers occupied the entire New York market. Logan kept scanning the shops selling toys, and his divine light gradually dimmed. In the huge city of New York, there was no trace of the X-Men. But should he be thankful? After all, no one would recognize him if he did that. At the intersection, Logan looked at the big screen on the building next to him, which was showing a huge poster of the Avengers family portrait. Passers-by would always stop to watch and tell the children around them about the Avengers' deeds. Logan looked at this scene with deep emotion. The Battle of New York had just ended in 2012, and the Avengers were household names. People's worship of the Avengers had reached its peak. They are so glorious. Samuel, holding a cigarette in his mouth and steering wheel in his hand, waited for the countdown of the traffic light, scanned the interface full of Avengers elements, and couldn't help sighing. Although the Battle of New York created them, the price was not small. Many civilians suffered in this war. My cousin lives here. He saw with his own eyes that the car he bought with a loan for many years was smashed by the Hulk. Josh in the back seat suddenly interrupted. He should be glad that he was not smashed into a pulp. Logan shrugged and said, "You can't expect that group of alien monsters to fight us in the Sahara Desert. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want to protect the Earth, some inevitable destruction is inevitable. Superheroes want to save the Earth. Naturally there will be some costs that no one in the world wants to see." Samuel smoked a cigarette and turned to look at Logan. "You have never been a superhero, how do you know what the Avengers think?" "Guess." Logan smiled and stopped talking. As the green light came on, Samuel started the car and drove all the way to the door of the hotel near New York Harbor. Compared with the prosperous high-rise buildings in the city center, this suburb near the port is not so gorgeous. The streets are no longer flat and flat. Every day, a large number of heavy trucks transporting goods go in and out, and the road is inevitably pressed into some potholes. The people coming and going are no longer the elites in suits and leather shoes. Most of them are construction workers and porters wearing white sweatshirts and yellow safety helmets on their heads. Logan and his friends opened a room in the hotel. The accommodation fee here is very cheap, and the corresponding environment is naturally not much better. There is only one bed in the small room, and the shower in the toilet does not even provide hot water. Logan guessed that there may still be sweat left by the previous tenant on the sheets. The main service objects of these cheap hotels are mostly dock workers or passengers who are about to land from the ship to stay overnight. If the fee is expensive, those people may prefer to sleep on the street. Although the room was opened, Logan and his friends did not plan to rest. It was already evening, and the sky was gradually getting dark. Their mission was at night, so there was no time for them to rest. The four of them squeezed into a room. Conrad threw his travel bag on the bed sheet. After opening it, a large bag was filled with pistols, silencers, spare magazines, blades and other weapons. The four of them took out their pistols, installed silencers, tested the guns, and stuffed bullets into the magazines. It's 7:30 p.m. now. We'll leave at 9 o'clock. The port will be closed at that time. No one will be guarding the containers specifically, but patrols will pass by from time to time. Logan loaded the bullets while explaining the details of the mission. Be careful not to be discovered by the patrol, otherwise once they call the police and guards can surround the entire port within 10 minutes. At that time, our only retreat is the sea behind the port. As he spoke, Logan glanced at Conrad. This guy has been silent since his departure. He basically didn't say a few words from Santa Fe to New York, and he no longer refuted any of Logan's remarks. Obviously, after the last incident, this guy learned well and at least did not dare to openly oppose Logan. The goal this time is clear. Logan put the compressed bullet clip into the pistol and said solemnly, "Chris wants us to find container number 79. There are 2 boxes of goods numbered BU-26 and BU-27. That is our mission. Remember, handle the object with care. There is a high probability that there is priceless porcelain or other antiques inside, which are very valuable." Although Chris said there were antiques there, Logan actually didn't believe everything he said. His intuition told him that this batch of goods was 100 times more important than the so-called antiques. The 3 Samuels nodded, and after arranging their equipment, they took out some compressed biscuits and water from their backpacks to replenish their energy. As night falls, the evening breeze blows from the port, and the smell of salty and wet seawater comes to your nostrils. The moisture in the air is simply not comparable to that in the desert areas of San Antonio. Logan and the others put on black clothes that were convenient for hiding in the night, drove around the port several times, and after determining the escape route, they parked the vehicle in a nearby parking lot and walked toward the port. At this time, the port has been closed. There is a 3-meter-high fence surrounding the outside. The roads leading to the interior of the port are also erected with straight poles blocking passage. There are guards holding batons on both sides of the straight poles to strictly guard them. However, this obstacle naturally did not trouble Logan and the others. They groped their way to a fence in the corner, easily climbed over the fence and entered the port. What comes into view is a large number of containers piled up here. Containers of various colors are piled up here neatly and orderly, with no end in sight. "Oh my God, when will we find this?" Samuel looked at the containers all over the floor and felt dizzy for a moment. Logan squatted down, looked around cautiously, and whispered, "They are all placed in order. As long as you find the order, you can find them quickly." After speaking, Logan walked carefully towards the container, checked the numbers on the containers, quickly sorted out the numbers on the containers, and followed the numbers towards the target. During this period, we met several patrols, but these patrols were not strict in their search. They just walked around the container community with flashlights. Logan and the others hid behind the containers when they saw the light, and did not cause any trouble at all. Any attention. After a smooth operation, the 4 finally found the target container number 79. "That's it." Samuel eagerly took out a small iron pliers from his lower back. "Get it early and go back to rest early. If we go back at this time, maybe we can have a couple of drinks in the bar downstairs of the hotel." With that said, he was about to break the lock on the container, etc. Logan suddenly stopped him in a low voice and put his finger on his lips. "Shish, someone is coming." His keen insight allowed him to clearly hear a thin sound approaching. The 3 of them looked around blankly, but heard nothing. Just as he was about to ask, deep footsteps suddenly sounded. "Hide first." Logan glanced around and pointed at the 2 stacked containers opposite container number 79. The other 3 people understood and quickly climbed up the container and lay on the top. The height of 2 containers makes it impossible to see the person lying on top when viewed from below. After a while, the footsteps became clearer and louder, and the sound was very dense. It sounded like there were many people. More importantly, the other party did not turn on the flashlight, and at the same time deliberately slowed down his steps. It was obvious that he was definitely not a port guard. The stranger's penetration made Logan frown. Rumlow, are you sure it's container number 79? A cold female voice came. Well, the intelligence shows this is where it is. A dull male voice responded to her. Oops. Logan was shocked. The other party was also coming to container no. 79. In order to find out the other party's purpose, Logan carefully stuck his head out and saw the figure below clearly. He was stunned for a moment. A team wearing special combat uniforms gathered around container number 79. The leader was a very charming woman with sassy orange-red hair and a beautiful face. She was wearing a tight-fitting black combat uniform. The beautiful figure is perfectly displayed. Black Widow, Natasha. Logan recognized the woman's identity at a glance, his heart suddenly tightened, and he quickly retracted his head. What's wrong? Samuel noticed something was wrong with Logan's expression and asked in a low voice. Logan frowned and tried to keep his voice as low as possible. They're from S.H.I.E.L.D. Logan never expected to encounter S.H.I.E.L.D. here. He expected to be discovered by the patrolling guards, he also expected to confront other guys who coveted the goods, and even expected to be completely surrounded by the owners of the goods, that is, the Juarez family, but he never thought that he would actually sensational S.H.I.E.L.D. At this time, Logan also realized that the goods there could never be smuggled porcelain or antiques. S.H.I.E.L.D. would not be interested in these things. What to do now? They're opening the containers. Josh L. suddenly reminded him. Below, a S.H.I.E.L.D. task force is picking locks. Logan knew that the goods had been taken away by S.H.I.E.L.D., and this trip was in vain. He didn't want to give up the reward of $20,000. As long as the money was credited, he could leave with the professor. Now in Santa Fe City, not only the Lawrence family knows his identity, but also Donald and his gang are eyeing him. The longer he stays in Santa Fe City, the higher the risk factor will obviously be. He didn't have time to delay any longer. This time, the S.H.I.E.L.D. task force is led by Black Widow. Her combat effectiveness is not too strong in the Avengers, so Logan is not without a chance. After thinking for a moment, Logan withdrew his head, turned to Chow Shear and others and said, "You three, separate a group of people and lead them away, and I'll find an opportunity to intercept the goods." The three of them were suddenly shocked. There are quite a few people down there, and they are all heavily armed, making them difficult to deal with at first glance. Logan whispered again. "Don't hesitate, I don't want this trip to be in vain." The three of them looked at each other in shock. Seeing that the container was about to be opened, they had no choice. They gritted their teeth and stood up and jumped from the container. "Hey, what are you doing? Destroying private property is a felony," Samuel yelled at the agents. Conrad on the side took out his pistol decisively, pulled the trigger without hesitation, and shot an agent through the chest, causing the body to fall to the ground. "You're crazy." Samuel looked at Conrad's smoking pistol and was dumbfounded. He had heard of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was an agent organization that worked vigorously and resolutely, even without regard for the consequences, because no matter how big the problem was, they could easily solve it. Angering S.H.I.E.L.D. will never end well. Without waiting for Samuel to criticize, all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were already looking at them, and several dark muzzles were pointed at them instantly. Samuel's scalp was numb when he saw it, and he turned around and ran away. At the same time, flames burst from the muzzles of the agents' guns, and the bullets scratched out of the silencers and almost passed by the backs of Samuel and Conrad. "It seems we are not the only ones eyeing this batch of goods." Rumlow put down his pistol. "I'll deal with them." After saying that, he ran quickly towards Samuel and the other two. Bang! At this time, Joshua also appeared on the other side at the right time, but instead of shouting, he hid behind a container, pretending to want to sneak attack, but accidentally touched the container and made a sound. After seeing Natasha and others looking at her, Chow Shear turned around and ran away without hesitation. When Natasha saw this, she frowned and ordered to the surrounding guards, "I'll deal with that one, the others stay on guard, and you notify Captain Rogers." After saying that, she quickly ran in the direction of Joshua. At this time, there were only 5 guards left standing in the container. Without hesitation, Logan jumped down from the container, turned his hands into fists, and hit the 2 guards directly below on the backs of their necks. The huge force instantly knocked the 2 guards unconscious and they fell heavily to the ground. When the other 3 guards saw this, their expressions suddenly changed, and they instantly raised their guns and pointed them at Logan. Before they could fire, Logan quickly took out his prepared pistol and pointed it at the gun-holding arms of the 3 guards and shot them. Bang bang bang. The silencer-equipped pistol made little noise, and its precise shooting skills instantly pierced the arms of the 3 guards. The sudden pain caused the pistols to fall out of their hands. Logan stepped forward without hesitation, and before they could react, he hit the 2 guards on the necks with his palm blade, knocking them out instantly. The last guard was shocked. He was about to bend down and pick up the pistol with his other hand, but Logan didn't give him this chance. He swept out a whip leg and hit the guard's chest hard. The majestic force instantly knocked the guard down. Stun. He did not kill these guards. Intercepting SHIELD's goods and killing SHIELD's agents are 2 different things. The former may be fine as long as he hides himself, but the latter will have to endure a thorough roundup by S.H.I.E.L.D. Right now, he doesn't want to have too much of a conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D. Call. As the 3 men fell, Logan breathed a long sigh of relief, put the pistol back on his waist, stretched out his steel claw and cut off the lock of the container directly. The huge red container has several overlapping boxes of goods. Logan took out the flashlight, covered the head of the flashlight with his hand, and then turned on the switch. The weak light shone on the goods through the seam of his hand. But after rummaging around, I didn't see any goods marked BU-26 and BU-27 at all. The codes of these containers do not start with BU at all. After making sure that he had not missed anything, Logan frowned, a bad premonition growing in his heart. There's something wrong with Chris' intelligence. Logan cursed in his heart, put away the flashlight and turned around to leave. It's really a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. It's a clumsy trick. A cold female voice came from behind, followed by the cold muzzle of a gun hitting the back of Logan's head. Tell me, who sent you here? Natasha stared at Logan and asked sharply, her finger on the trigger. As long as Logan moved a little, she would shoot without hesitation. Logan stood there quietly without any response. Just when Natasha was about to ask. Phew. Logan suddenly bent down and tilted his head. His head tilted and he was instantly out of the muzzle of the gun. At the same time, he raised his leg and swept it backwards, directly hitting Natasha's soft abdomen. Natasha was kicked away by the powerful force in an instant, and her slender body hit the container behind her. Hiss. Natasha took a breath of cold air due to the severe pain in her abdomen. What surprised her even more was that this person was not inferior to the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in terms of strength and reaction speed. Ordinary people don't have this strength. However, Natasha, who has a strong fighting quality, did not let the pistol fall off because of the heavy blow. Even though her body was swept away, she still held the handle of the pistol tightly in her hand, and raised the gun again without hesitation, aiming at Logan in the container. This time she no longer hesitated, and her fingers exerted force, and the trigger was about to be pulled. Bang! There was no gunshot, and Logan kicked the pistol away with one foot, staring at Natasha. Don't move. Natasha raised her head and stared at Logan. Going against S.H.I.E.L.D. usually doesn't end well. While speaking, she tried to see Logan's face carefully. But since there was no light here, the only illumination was the moon 380,000 kilometers away, and Logan's face was really not clear. She could only vaguely recognize that this was an old man, at least in his 60s or 70s. Is he wearing makeup or is he really that old? Can a 60 or 70-year-old really have such explosive power? For a moment, Natasha was a little absent-minded. As a top agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., her body's ability to withstand blows is much stronger than that of ordinary people. An ordinary person's full-strength attack can't make her lose her combat effectiveness directly. But the kick from this person just now made her unable to stand up at all. The pain from her stomach seemed to explode. Where are the things in here? Logan pointed to the container with the door open behind him. Natasha was stunned and realized that there was nothing in it. She snorted coldly. You ask me. We didn't even have time to open the lock. Logan understood that Natasha was not lying. They obviously received wrong information. Logan cursed. Either the Juarez family deliberately released false news about container number 79, or they knew that this thing was very important and temporarily changed the location of the goods. It seems that this batch of goods is definitely not ordinary. Not only is it so valued by the Juarez family, but even S.H.I.E.L.D. is involved. $20,000 is not enough for this order. While Logan was thinking, Natasha quietly reached for the dagger at her waist, watching Logan's eyes gradually glow with murderous light. However, her small movement did not hide from Logan, and he kicked out fiercely, hitting Natasha's neck heavily. The powerful force instantly made Natasha's eyes roll back and fainted completely. Logan looked around and strode away without hesitation. At this time, Samuel's voice came from the communication device in his ear. "James, are you done over there? We have escaped, and the guys chasing us are rushing back." Logan responded in a deep voice, "I am evacuating. If you can't find anything, it's meaningless to continue searching here. Besides, the people from S.H.I.E.L.D. may come to support you at any time. If they are targeted, you can't get away at all." At this time, Samuel's somewhat panicked voice came again. "That's good, see you in the car, we have to evacuate quickly. Conrad killed a S.H.I.E.L.D. person, they will definitely not let it go, it will be too late if we don't leave now." As soon as these words came out, Logan's face suddenly changed. Idiot, he couldn't help but curse. Killing the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent was a big deal. However, just as he finished speaking, a clear voice suddenly sounded in front of him. "Old man, it's not good to swear." A tall and sturdy figure appeared. He had a typical American white face. The white and blue tights outlined his sturdy figure. His blonde hair and blue eyes were enough to make girls' hearts beat. His eyebrows revealed a righteous spirit. He held a vibranium round shield with the American logo painted on it. "Steve Rogers." Logan frowned and subconsciously covered his face. "Have we met?" Steve was stunned when he heard his name. It was not surprising that the other party could call out his name. After all, with the end of the New York War, his name had long been known among the people. What surprised him was that the other party's voice had an illusion of déjà vu. In the faint moonlight, the general outline of Logan's face seemed to overlap slightly with an old friend. Maybe not. Logan shook his head. It was not a wise choice for the two to meet now. But looking at Steve's expression, Logan immediately realized that he was overthinking. Steve Rogers in the blue and white uniform in front of him seemed to have a hard time remembering the teammates he had fought side by side with. This was a good thing. Even though he and Steve were comrades in the same camp during World War II, his friendship with Steve was not as deep as Bucky. Now Steve is the glorious Captain America, while he is just an old and weak mutant wanted by the government. Steve might fight the government for Bucky, but he would never break up with the government for himself. He would definitely stand on the side of the government. "Your voice sounds familiar." Steve stared at Logan and continued to speak. "Really?" Logan suddenly smiled. "Maybe we really know each other. Since we know each other, let our old friend go. Don't even think about it, buddy." Steve shook his head and blocked the round shield in front of him. He would not let an unidentified guy who openly attacked S.H.I.E.L.D. leave. However, as soon as Steve's voice fell, Logan did not stop at all, but rushed towards Steve. Phew. The sudden acceleration made Logan look as fast as the wind, and his clenched fist hit Steve's thigh without hesitation. He knew the power of this vibranium round shield, even his steel claws could hardly penetrate the shield. But the disadvantage of the vibranium shield is also obvious. It is too small. When it is blocked on the chest, the part below the waist cannot be blocked at all. Bang! A dull sound suddenly sounded, and Logan spared no effort to punch Steve's thigh. The pain from the muscle made Steve gasp, and the powerful impact force pushed him back several steps. Steve stabilized his body, endured the pain from his thigh, and looked up at Logan. An old man in his 60s or 70s could have such explosive power. If he hadn't been injected with super serum, his body's toughness would have reached an unimaginable level, then this punch would have broken his thigh bone directly. Just as Steve was stunned, Logan suddenly took out the pistol from his waist and pulled the trigger at Steve's head without hesitation. The hot bullet rolled out of the barrel, and the fire from the muzzle made Steve's pupils suddenly change, and he quickly raised the round shield to block it. Ding ding ding. The high-speed rotating bullets were all blocked by the vibranium round shield, making a crisp clanging sound of steel collision. Logan's fingers kept pulling, and in less than 3 seconds, the bullets in the magazine were quickly emptied. As the last bullet was fired, Logan decisively threw away the pistol, crouched down, supported himself with his left hand and left foot, and quickly swept his right foot towards Steve's calf. The speed was so fast that Steve, who had his head tucked under the round shield, had no time to react. He was directly hit by Logan's sweeping lower body. The huge force made his calf almost feel like the muscles were broken, and his body was unstable, and he fell heavily to the ground in an instant. Seeing this, Logan's eyes were cold, and he suddenly flew up, like a wolf that pounced on its prey in the night. Steve, who was lying on the ground, had his pupils shrink sharply, and raised his shield again to block it. Bang! His fists hit the round shield heavily, but did not cause any damage. Steve lay on the ground, supporting the round shield with one hand, and swung at Logan's head with the other hand. Logan's expression condensed, and he exerted force with both fists, and his body bounced up quickly. Steve's fist almost brushed past his nose. Taking advantage of this gap, Steve turned around and jumped up quickly, staring at Logan in front of him, his eyes full of surprise. After this short fight, he could see that Logan's fighting skills were so rich that he would not miss any opportunity at all. As long as he had a gap in his defense, he would decisively attack the gap. And he even clearly understood the defensive power of his vibranium shield and kept avoiding his shield. With such fighting qualities, even he, a veteran of World War II who had participated in major battles, looked like a rookie at this time. Steve understood that if he continued to passively defend, he would not be able to gain an advantage over the opponent. Thinking of this, Steve did not hesitate and rushed towards Logan. The vibranium round shield in his hand seemed to turn into a blade, constantly slashing at Logan. He could not continue to passively defend, he had to actively attack and establish an advantage. Logan looked at the vibranium shield that was slashing at him, knowing that he couldn't take it head-on, so he dodged it quickly, and at the same time, taking advantage of Steve's inertia after the slash, he punched him in the chest again. But Steve was a veteran who had experienced many battles, and he reacted instantly, blocking Logan's fist with his other hand in front of his chest. The two sides wrestled together instantly, and the speed and power they unleashed were terrifying attacks that ordinary people could not bear. Even the surrounding containers were affected. As long as one of the two simply bumped into them, a big hole would instantly dent the heavy iron box. However, although Captain America had strong physical fitness, he had been frozen for 70 years after all, and many of his fighting skills were already behind the times. On the other hand, although Logan was physically weak and his strength and speed were slightly inferior to Captain America, the fighting skills he had cultivated for nearly 200 years were not comparable to Steve. With his superb fighting skills, he even suppressed Steve and gained the upper hand. The two sides fought for several minutes without any results, and seemed to have reached some tacit understanding and retreated several meters away, staring at each other in the night. "Were you a soldier before?" Steve could see that Logan's fighting skills were very similar to American military fighting skills, and such fighting skills would only be popular in the army. Moreover, Logan's fighting skills were very superb, and he was definitely a senior veteran who mixed in the barracks. Logan did not answer, staring at Steve with wolf-like eyes, and rushed towards Steve with both legs at the same time. He heard footsteps coming from a distance. It seemed that the support of S.H.I.E.L.D. had arrived. If he was surrounded by S.H.I.E.L.D., he would have no chance to escape. He had to deal with Steve as soon as possible and escape quickly before the large number of support from S.H.I.E.L.D. arrived. "We have all been soldiers, maybe we can sit down and talk." Steve looked at Logan who was rushing towards him. His expression suddenly changed, and he shouted while throwing the round shield with all his strength. The round shield rotated at a high speed, and the speed was even comparable to the propeller of a helicopter. The force it burst out could even bend thick steel in an instant. Bang! But what surprised Steve was that Logan opened his hand and caught the round shield like a cannonball with his bare hands. Seeing this scene, Steve's pupils widened, and he couldn't help but take a breath. Not many people can block the attack he just made so easily. Could it be that he is also a super soldier? Steve had some guesses in his heart. However, before he could think deeply, Logan swung the round shield back with force. Steve didn't dare to be arrogant, and quickly raised his hands to catch it. The powerful force brought by the round shield made his arms feel numb. But Logan didn't give him a chance to relax, and his body rushed again, like a hurricane, and instantly reached Steve. Bang bang bang. The iron fist fell as fast as raindrops, and Steve raised the round shield to block, but the powerful force still beat him back in embarrassment. The shield vibrated violently in this fierce attack, and the buzzing sound resounded through the night. Just as Steve was thinking about how to fight back, suddenly, a dazzling white light flashed. Whoosh! At some point, a dazzling steel claw suddenly appeared under the moonlight, and chopped down heavily on the vibranium shield. Bang! Swish! The harsh sound of steel friction resounded. The extreme speed even made Steve unable to see clearly what was going on. Before he could come to his senses, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, and the stomach acid rolled up to his throat. At some point, Logan's knee had hit Steve's abdomen hard. The powerful force instantly knocked him several meters away, and he hit a container hard, and the iron box instantly dented a large piece. Captain Rogers, see you again if we are lucky. Logan quickly retracted his steel claws, put his palm in front of his eyebrows, and swung it casually, turning around and fleeing into the darkness. Steve leaned against the dented container and wanted to get up and chase, but the severe pain in his abdomen made him unable to move at all. Moreover, the 3 subtle claw marks on the vibranium shield also made him completely lose the desire to chase. Shield broken. How is it possible? Steve gently stroked the vibranium shield, and the clear cracks returned by his touch made him unable to believe his eyes for a moment. This is not an ordinary peeling paint, but there are really 3 deep claw marks. He couldn't believe that something in this world could leave traces on the vibranium shield. Vibranium is the hardest metal currently known, and even direct fire from a fighter jet's cannon cannot leave any dents on it. How did that person just do it? Captain, are you okay? When Steve was shocked, there was a rush of footsteps in his ears. Rumlow, who originally led people to chase Samuel and Conrad, finally came back. Seeing Steve sitting on the ground with a frown on his face, Rumlow hurried forward and knelt down to check Steve's injuries. The other agents hurriedly checked the companions lying on the ground and the Black Widow's casualties. I'm fine. Steve stood up slowly. Although Logan's attack was very fierce, he was a super soldier injected with super serum after all, and such injuries were not a cause for concern. He ran away. That guy's strength is terrifying. Steve spoke in a calm voice, unable to help but recall the details of the battle just now. Although the opponent could not quickly defeat him, his fierce offensive and superb fighting skills did defeat him step by step. If you fight with it for a long time without foreign aid, you will definitely lose in the end. Thinking of this, Steve couldn't help but frown. I didn't catch his accomplices either. Langlom's angry speech interrupted Steve's contemplation, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Those guys are like mice, disappearing in the blink of an eye. In addition, there are too many containers here and the terrain is complicated, so there's nothing you can do about them." Steve nodded, looked at the opened container, and said solemnly, "The focus is not on people, hurry up and see if the goods are still there." As soon as these words came out, Langlom reacted instantly and quickly took Steve into the container, turned on the flashlight and searched among the pile of cargo boxes. No, Langlom looked at the goods carefully and did not find the 2 boxes of BU-26 and BU-27. Which group of people took you away? Langlom rummaged around in the cargo box unwillingly. Stop looking for it. At this time, Natasha's voice suddenly came. Natasha looked very bad at this time. She did not have Steve's strong physical fitness. Logan's heavy blow made her look pale. With the help of an agent, she slowly walked into the container. We have all been fooled. There is a problem with the intelligence. The goods are not here at all. Natasha saw Logan enter the container with her own eyes, but ultimately returned without success. She was sure that at least the goods did not fall into the hands of the other party. Steve frowned, and after thinking for a moment, he immediately ordered, "Report to the headquarters, send more manpower, seal off the entire terminal, and search every container." Roram nodded heavily, immediately walked out of the container, and contacted SHIELD headquarters to ask them to send more people over. Steve turned to look at the other agents. "You go and pull out all the surveillance videos in the dock, including all the surveillance information on nearby streets. You must find the traces of the attackers just now and determine their escape route." Several agents also quickly turned around and took action. Steve and Natasha were the only 2 people left in the container. By the light of the flashlight in Steve's hand, Natasha noticed 3 scratches on the vibranium shield. "Captain, your shield." Natasha stepped forward with an expression of disbelief, and lightly ran her fingers over the scratches. After feeling the bumpy feeling from her fingertips, she retracted her fingers as if she was electrocuted. Is it that person just now? Natasha raised her head sharply, her eyes widened, unable to believe the facts in front of her. Someone can actually leave traces on vibranium. Steve's expression also became very solemn. He looked down at the shield on his arm and gently touched the claw marks. Looking at the 3 sharp claw marks, he suddenly thought of a person in his mind. Speaking of which, I am reminded of an old comrade. His steel claws still impress me to this day. Steve murmured, his expression lost in memories. Old comrade. Natasha was stunned. Steve had been frozen for 70 years. The people he could call his old comrades were probably hundreds of years old. Steve nodded, an old comrade in World War II, but I might have been overly worried. It's been more than 70 years, and there's no way he could have survived to this day. Even if he could have survived to this day, he would still be a centenarian. Natasha nodded noncommittally, but the identity of this group of people is definitely not simple. Whether it is Logan's superb fighting skills or the sophisticated weapons in their team, they are definitely not something that ordinary organizations can achieve. After thinking for a moment, Natasha suddenly said, could it be a Hydra agent? She believes that apart from S.H.I.E.L.D., the only organization with such capabilities is Hydra. Hydra. Steve's expression suddenly became extremely disgusted. I thought they had all their heads chopped off during World War II. The heads that Hydra cuts off will grow back. Natasha sighed helplessly. Let's report the situation to Nick Fury first. He needs to pay a price for his wrong intelligence. Steve nodded, turned around and walked out of the container. He subconsciously glanced at the place where the previous fight took place. The dazzling steel claws under the moonlight flashed in his mind, and his brows instantly furrowed. Those steel claws look so similar. Is it really a coincidence? There is also a super soldier with claws in Hydra. Meanwhile, in a hotel near the port, the 4 people gathered in the room. The failure of the mission made several of them a little disgraced, and the one with the ugliest look was none other than Conrad. Idiot, who asked you to kill S.H.I.E.L.D. people? Logan stood in front of Conrad and shouted angrily with a serious expression, S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers are inextricably linked. If we offend them, even the Lawrence family will not dare to protect us. Conrad sat in a chair, his head buried in silence, holding a beer can tightly in his hand. Logan stared at Conrad. Sometimes he wanted to kill this idiot. If S.H.I.E.L.D. really investigates the agent's death, it will be useless even if he runs away from the United States. Samuel shrank his head. He noticed the anger in Logan, and he was so scared that he didn't dare to speak at all. However, Joshua was quite calm. In order to ease the mood of the team, he quickly said, Conrad was just impulsive. Besides, there is no point getting angry now. The fact that the agent is dead is irreversible. Instead of being angry, it's better to think about what to do next. Logan took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, and said coldly, the information this time is wrong. I will contact Chris first to see what plans he has in the future. Logan walked out of the room just as the door closed. Conrad's silent face instantly turned into anger, and the anger in his heart caused him to crush the beer can in his hand, and the wine scattered on the floor. Logan, I'm glad to receive your call. How is the situation? Has the goods arrived? Chris's brisk voice came from the phone. No, Logan responded in a deep voice, your information is wrong. Those 2 boxes of goods are not in the container at all. Chris on the other end of the phone was stunned, and his original briskness disappeared instantly. How could it be? Are you sure you have searched carefully? Although I'm a little old, I'm not blind yet. Logan was sullen, and Chris' poor intelligence made everyone work in vain all night. And he might also get into trouble with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain America, which is not a good thing for him. He asked, what are those 2 boxes of goods? Even S.H.I.E.L.D. was attracted. We had a conflict with them. Conrad even killed a S.H.I.E.L.D. person. Our current situation is very difficult. Danger. Upon hearing the news, Chris was furious, this idiot. The other end of the phone took a deep breath and said again, listen, Logan, that batch of goods is really important. We must get it. Don't come back yet. I'm going to find out the true whereabouts of that batch of goods. You're crazy. Logan growled angrily. This is New York. Maybe they have started to besiege us all over the city. Staying here is tantamount to suicide. After a pause, he added again, if S.H.I.E.L.D. knew that I was Wolverine, the situation would get worse. I know it's dangerous, Chris answered unceremoniously, No one wants to offend S.H.I.E.L.D., but that batch of goods is more important. As long as you help me get that batch of goods, I will reward you up to 100,000. Not even $1 million. Logan decisively refused. No matter how much money I have no life to spend, it will just be a pile of blank paper. Logan, 100,000 is not a small amount. Chris's voice suddenly became extremely dangerous. It's enough to buy your old father a comfortable retirement home. Logan was silent, which was a naked threat. 100,000, not a penny less. In the end, Logan had no choice but to accept it. Now that he is no longer with the professor, it would be easy for Chris to hurt him. Hearing this, Chris laughed again. Wise choice, I will go find out the information and wait for my news. After saying that, the phone hung up. Logan looked at the phone. His expression became extremely cold. He clenched his fist and smashed it against the wall. Chris, you will soon pay for your actions. Logan took a deep breath. He didn't expect Chris to be so cruel. But it won't be long before the Lawrence family understands the consequences of driving away wolves and devouring sheep. Logan adjusted his attitude and turned to look out the window at the port not far away. There is no place to stay. S.H.I.E.L.D. will find this place soon. We have to change places. In the suite, Logan stood by the window, gently opened the curtains, and cautiously looked at the traffic outside. After last night, he always felt that S.H.I.E.L.D. spies were everywhere. Even though they had moved overnight to a hotel more than 10 kilometers away from the New York port, S.H.I.E.L.D. spies were everywhere. Logan is afraid of being targeted by S.H.I.E.L.D., and even more afraid of Hydra. At this stage, S.H.I.E.L.D. has not yet carried out a major purge, and there are still many Hydra members inside. Snake S.H.I.E.L.D. is not called Snake S.H.I.E.L.D. for nothing. Hydra agents have even less bottom lines than S.H.I.E.L.D., not to mention that Hydra has internal anatomy and research on mutants. Now he can only hide himself as much as possible, and even only orders takeout when eating, and never goes out unless necessary. In the suite, Samuel and the three of them gathered around the bed, counting weapons and supplies. James, we're running low on ammunition. Joshua looked at the remaining bullets in his backpack, only a few scattered ones. Chris said that the cargo was just antique ceramics, which led them to make a mistake in thinking that the mission would not be too complicated and they did not carry much ammunition at all. Logan thought for a moment and said to Joshua, you and Conrad go out to purchase a batch. It's not enough if you don't have enough ammunition. After all, the three of them except yourself are just ordinary people. But fortunately this is the United States, and ammunition is not difficult to buy. You just need to find a gun store. However, it was not convenient for Logan to travel, so the purchasing task could only be left to Joshua and Conrad. Although it was late at night last night, he was not sure whether Steve and Natasha saw his appearance clearly. How dare he take this risk? Remember, don't draw anyone's attention and hide yourself. Logan told the two people before leaving. Joshua nodded, pulled the obviously reluctant Conrad out of the suite, put on his peaked cap, lowered the brim, and walked carefully on the streets of New York. What happened at the port the night before left them with lingering fears. However, Conrad's face was full of displeasure and he said, no one has dared to ask me to go shopping before. Joshua naturally knew that Conrad was dissatisfied, so he had no choice but to persuade him, stop complaining, without James, we have been dismissed after the mission in Nevada. It was an accident that time. Conrad retorted full of resentment. After all, he had walked that road several times, and only that time did the enemy appear. Joshua shrugged, stopped talking, and scanned the neighborhood, looking for the location of the gun store. The streets of New York are very prosperous, with all kinds of shops, including many gun shops. After the two selected one that seemed to be of average size, Joshua went in alone to buy bullets. Conrad wandered aimlessly outside, and finally stopped in front of a garage sale. There are many strange things on display in this stall, all of which are small things with a sense of the times, such as commemorative medals of the founding of the United States, cowboy hats from the cowboy era, etc. Conrad chose a mechanical watch that looked like it was made in the last century. He put it on his hand and saw that it was good and affordable, so he paid for it. While the stall owner was giving him change, he picked up an old comic book on the stall. This comic looks old, the paper is even a little yellowed, and there is a big X written on the cover. What kind of comic is this? I've never heard of it. Conrad flipped through the comics and asked the stall owner at the same time. The stall owner was an old man who looked to be in his 70s. After glancing at the comic cover, he said indifferently, "Old antiques from the last century were very popular at the time. If you are interested, you can take away $10. A crappy comic costs $10, are you crazy?" Conrad felt disgusted and was about to put it down, but suddenly he saw a familiar face in the comic. He stopped putting down his hand and stared at the face carefully. This is a comic about Wolverine. He was quite famous at the time, but now he is an outlaw. The comics about him have long been out of print. Maybe my copy will be the last one. $10 is a bargain. Quote. The stall owner spoke with a groan, muttering that Conrad didn't know what he was selling. But at this time, Conrad had no intention of listening to the stall owner's nonsense, and his eyes were fixed on Wolverine in the comics. Although it is a comic, the portraits of the characters are very realistic, and the Wolverine in the painting looks very similar to James. The only difference is that James looks much older. James. Wolverine. Conrad murmured in a low voice, thinking of James's performance. A sinister smile instantly appeared on his face. He slammed the comic book shut. $10, I want it. Unexpectedly, this trip would bring unexpected surprises. James, it seems you are hiding a big secret. At this time, Joshua also happened to walk out of the gun shop, holding a black bag in his hand. Seeing Conrad's spring-like smile, he was obviously taken aback and said, "Did you find the money? You are so happy." "I got a big bargain, a good watch." Conrad revealed the mechanical watch on his wrist and shook it as if to show off. "It's just a broken watch." Joshua glanced at it and suddenly lost interest. The two returned to the suite, but Logan was nowhere to be seen. Only Samuel sat boredly in the living room and watched TV. "Where's James?" Conrad secretly touched the comics in his arms, feeling a little unbearable. "In the room." Samuel pointed to the room without looking back. Click. Then he heard the door open and then slam shut. Conrad's sudden action made Josh and Samuel look at each other in bewilderment. Ever since the incident in Texas, Conrad had been like a mouse seeing a cat when he saw Logan, and he couldn't hide from him. What happened today? Facing Samuel's expression, Josh also shook his head in confusion. In the room, Logan was sitting at the table reading a book. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he raised his head unhappily. When he saw that it was Conrad, his face was full of anger. "Don't you knock before coming in?" Conrad ignored Logan, stared at Logan's eyes, smiled, and said, "I saw something very interesting. I think you might be interested too." The wolf's intuition made Logan frown, and he had a bad premonition in his heart, but he still said sternly, "I'm not interested, get out." Conrad laughed and walked to Logan's desk, took out the comics hidden under his jacket, and threw them on the table. Wolverine's comics are said to be a product of the last century. It's strange to say, his face is too similar to yours, just like you when you were young. The eye-catching big X on the cover poked Logan's eyes directly, and his face instantly darkened. Conrad looked at Logan's face, confirmed his guess, pulled out a chair and sat down, stared at Logan's eyes, and smiled as a winner. What's more, the protagonist in the comics has the ability to attack with steel claws that can be extended freely. This reminds me of what happened in Nevada. If I remember correctly, of the 10 bodies in the wooden warehouse, only 1 died of gunshot wounds, and the remaining 9 died of claw-like sharp blades. Logan looked cold, and his cold eyes fell on Conrad. "What do you want to say? Should I call you James, or should I call you Wolverine, Mr. Logan Howlett?" Conrad smiled proudly, and the introduction on the cover of the comics had Wolverine's real name on it. Logan no longer responded, and his eyes gradually became cold. But Conrad was still fearless. "I haven't told this secret yet. If you want me to keep it in my stomach, then you'd better disappear forever after this mission, otherwise, I believe that many people will want to know Wolverine's address. Guess what you will face at that time, prison, or laboratory, or zoo." Conrad smiled and slapped the table, stood up, and strode out of the room. However, he did not notice that Logan was staring at his back with murderous intent in his eyes. It seems that someone takes himself too seriously. Logan pursed his lips, but could not help but smile again. Now his strength has not recovered, and he cannot move Lawrence and Donald for the time being. But it is more than enough to kill a mercenary. The number of mercenaries who died in his hands is countless. People may only remember that Wolverine is a superhero, but forget that before that, he was also the battlefield demon, with the most dead souls among all superheroes. Chapter 31. The past few days were absolutely tormenting for Samuel. He couldn't even go to the bar downstairs, and he had to stay with several men. He had to endure women knocking on the door every night. And such difficult days finally ushered in a turnaround 3 days later. Chris finally sent intelligence that the goods of the Juarez family were located in a remote logistics warehouse in the suburbs of New York. The Juarez family might not have thought that the hiding place would be found even if it was so remote. Because the logistics warehouse is a bit far away and it takes at least a few hours to drive, Logan asked Josh and others to prepare weapons and equipment and set off in advance before sunset. Samuel and Josh first went to find a reliable truck. As soon as the goods were in hand, they had to leave the city immediately to avoid more trouble. Before the action, Logan told Conrad alone, "This mission is very important, don't mess around." Conrad smiled, stretched out his hand and patted Logan on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself first, Mr. Howlett." Logan looked at Conrad's back and his eyes darkened. A few hours later, it was almost dawn, the moon was high in the sky, and the jungle was silent, with only some unknown nocturnal animals making low sounds from time to time. Samuel was responsible for meeting near the warehouse, while Logan took Josh Conrad to hide in the jungle, looking at several warehouses not far away. All the warehouses were dark, and there was no sign of human activity except for a few security guards who occasionally passed by on patrol. "The goods are in warehouse No. 5. Logan pointed to the 5th warehouse. "How do we get in?" Josh stared at warehouse number 5 with a frown. "These warehouses have no windows and use iron doors. Even if they can pick the locks, the noise when opening the door will attract the security guards in the first place." Ventilation duct. Logan looked at the vent on the top of the warehouse and responded softly. In addition to sending him the target address, Chris even sent him the drawings of the warehouse. The map showed that in addition to the front door and the small door at the back, the ventilation duct on the top is also a good choice for entering the warehouse. In order to ensure that the closed warehouse can be ventilated normally, these ventilation ducts are designed to be large enough for an adult to walk through with a bent waist. Logan took advantage of the gap when a team of security guards passed by and quickly ran to the outside of warehouse number 5. They just calculated the time when the security guards passed by. At least half an hour, those security guards will not pass here again. When he came to the outside of warehouse number 5, Logan took out a hook rope and threw the hook to the top of the warehouse with force. With a strong pull, the hook firmly hooked the stone bricks on the top of the warehouse. Several people easily climbed to the roof of the warehouse with the help of the hook rope and entered the warehouse through the ventilation duct. There was no light in the dark warehouse. Logan used the light of the flashlight to carefully search in the warehouse. Here, after searching for a while, Logan finally found 2 boxes of goods marked BU-26 and BU-27. The iron cargo box was larger than an ordinary briefcase. It was sealed on the outside and locked with 3 locks. The seal had a number written on it. Joshua and Conrad, who were originally searching elsewhere, heard Logan's voice and hurried over to check. After confirming that this was the target, the two couldn't help but smile. In their eyes, this was not a cargo, but a reward for the mission. However, just as they were about to pick up the cargo, a crisp bang suddenly sounded in the darkness. Along with it, there were also dazzling headlights on the top of the warehouse, and the dark warehouse was instantly bright. The sudden strong light made Logan and his men all stretch out their arms to block the light. "Papa papa!" A loud applause suddenly came, and the 3 looked in the direction of the applause, only to see more than a dozen figures walking out of the open corridor on the 2nd floor of the warehouse, each holding a submachine gun. The leader was a middle-aged bearded man in his 50s. He stood on the corridor and kept clapping, and laughed. "Lawrence really put a lot of thought into it, and you can find this place." Joshua cursed. "Being surrounded in the warehouse is not good. People from Juarez." Logan frowned, staring at the bearded man. The bearded man looked at them as if he was looking at prey, and said regretfully, "It was a wrong decision for you to work for Lawrence." He waved his hand, his face instantly fierce. "Kill them." As soon as the voice fell, more than a dozen gunmen pulled the trigger almost at the same time. Bang bang bang. The harsh gunshots echoed violently in the warehouse, and bullets like rain shot out from the muzzle of the submachine gun. Logan's pupils shrank suddenly, and he grabbed Conrad and Josh and hid behind the large cargo box. The fierce bullets hit the cargo box, making a crackling sound. Logan felt the opponent's powerful firepower, frowned, and after thinking, he turned to Chowshire and said, "You take a box of goods and run away later, we will cover you." The gunshots here must have alarmed the guards outside. If they don't leave early, once the guards surround the warehouse, they will never be able to get away. Chowshire also understood the current situation and nodded heavily. Logan held the pistol with both hands and whispered, 3, 2, 1. After speaking, he stood up suddenly, raised the pistol and pulled the trigger. Bang bang bang. As the bullets sprayed out, the heads of several gunmen were instantly penetrated by bullets. The bearded man was shocked by the superb marksmanship, turned around, and quickly hid behind a pillar. The rest of the gunmen panicked and quickly hid behind the bunkers. "Now, use the cargo box as a bunker, run," Logan shouted. Josher quickly lifted a target cargo, blocked the cargo box in front of him, and ran towards the door with all his strength. In the corridor, the gunmen hiding behind the bunkers also quickly stretched out their guns and shot at Josher. Fortunately, the cargo box blocked a lot of bullets for him, and Logan's suppression made it difficult for many gunmen to show their heads. Only 3 gunmen with better angles could shoot at him, so he did not cause any harm. "Stop him." The bearded man hid behind a pillar, looking at Josher's figure and roaring loudly. The rest of the gunmen heard the words and showed their heads almost at the same time. Some of them fired in the direction of Logan, forcing Logan to retreat behind the cargo box. The other gunmen pointed their guns at Josher. Just as they were about to shoot Josh, Conrad, who had already crawled to the other side, suddenly raised his body and shouted, "Hey, this way." As he spoke, several bullets hit the gunman accurately. As a mercenary, his shooting skills were naturally not bad. Logan also took the opportunity to counterattack and shot all the gunmen who shot at Josh. The bearded man looked at his men falling one after another, his face turned pale, and he ran out while the firepower was not concentrated on him. And Josh, under strong cover, successfully opened the warehouse door and rushed out quickly holding the cargo box. Finally dead, Conrad looked at the large number of fallen bodies and breathed a sigh of relief. There are footsteps, the security has arrived. Logan clearly heard a burst of hurried footsteps coming. The front door can't go out, go through the back door. He remembered that there was a small door behind the warehouse to go out. Yeah, Conrad didn't think much and ran towards the back door with the cargo box. But when they got to the back door, they were stunned. The back door is different from the front door. The front door is a mechanical lock, just like the door of a room. It needs a key to open from the outside, and it can be opened from the inside by turning the handle, so Josh can easily open the door and go out. But the back door is an old-fashioned lock. It has been completely locked from the outside and cannot be opened from the inside. What should I do now? Conrad was completely panicked. The footsteps behind him were getting more and more rapid. The security personnel and gunmen had entered the warehouse and would soon surround it. Logan glanced behind him and suddenly raised his foot and kicked the back door hard. Bang! The huge force instantly bent the iron door, and the lock on the outside could not withstand the violent impact and broke instantly. Conrad looked at the open door and looked at the old man in front of him with shock in his eyes. But he also knew that now was not the time to be surprised, so he quickly picked up the goods and rushed out the door. However, the next second, he stopped his steps just as he was about to take them, staring blankly at Logan beside him, or more precisely at the pistol in Logan's hand. The black muzzle of the gun was pointed at his heart. "You," Conrad panicked, and was about to speak, but Logan pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! The piercing gunshot sounded, and the impact of the bullet instantly threw him to the ground. He stared at Logan's cold expression, full of disbelief. "Boy, you messed with the wrong person." Logan picked up the box that fell to the ground. Despicable. Conrad fell to the ground, blood oozing out, his face full of anger. He raised the gun in his hand and tried to fight back with the last bit of strength. Bang, bang, bang. What awaited him were several ruthless bullets, and blood flowed all over the ground. Conrad died completely with reluctance. Logan looked at Conrad, who was dying, and turned to look at the gunman who was about to catch up. He shot Conrad in the head, and then ran towards the meeting point with the cargo box. At this time, a few lines of words appeared in front of him. You made the right choice and eliminated a potential threat. Prestige +10. Awakening new special ability, heat vision. Special abilities, self-healing factor, thermal vision. Logan looked at the extra column, new abilities. I didn't expect that after killing Conrad and solving a potential threat, I would unlock a new ability. Thermal vision may seem useless, but it is one of Superman's superpowers. Although his thermal vision at this stage is definitely not as exaggerated as Superman's, having a new ability means an additional means of self-protection. Now he can't go far just relying on his self-healing ability and the steel claws on his hands. And he will even be able to awaken more other abilities in the future. Bang! The sound of gunfire from behind interrupted Logan's thoughts, and the whistling bullets almost passed by his ears. Logan cursed and strode out of the warehouse area. The gunfire from the gunman behind was so loud that it completely woke up the quiet jungle and startled countless birds. Fortunately, the running gunman's accuracy was really poor, and coupled with Logan's unpredictable escape route, the trajectory was always deviated. James, this way. Suddenly, a bright light came in, and the roar of the truck at full speed came, accompanied by Samuel's waving shouts. Logan got into the car with a few big steps and quickly closed the door. The bullets behind him whizzed in and hit the door with a clang. Even the car windows were hit by bullets, but fortunately, the special bulletproof glass did not shatter, but left a layer of dense cracks like a spider web. Samuel quickly stepped on the accelerator, and the truck roared out, quickly throwing away the large number of gunmen behind him. Hurry up and get out of the city. Logan sat in the co-pilot and panted heavily, turning his head to urge Samuel. It is late at night, and the traffic is light. It is the best time to leave the city. If it is delayed until dawn, the cars of those office workers will block all the main roads. At that time, both the Juarez family and S.H.I.E.L.D. can easily catch up with them. But Conrad hasn't got in the car yet. Samuel noticed that Conrad did not get in the car with Logan. Logan sighed and said, the people of the Juarez family have killed him. What? Samuel's face was full of surprise, and then turned into anger. He and Conrad have performed many dangerous missions. Although that guy has a bad temper, he is also a teammate who has been through life and death. Hearing the news of his death, Samuel's heart was unconsciously angry. Josh in the back seat also frowned, but he was relatively calm. He said in a deep voice, okay, let's get out of the city first. The goods are important. We can talk about revenge later. Samuel nodded and ran towards the New York border at full speed. Not long after Logan and his group left, a series of black SUVs roared in and surrounded the logistics warehouse in Juarez in an instant. A group of fully armed agents ran down from the car and searched all the warehouses in all directions. In just a few minutes, they completely captured the people of the Juarez family. My God, is there a terrorist incident here? In the warehouse, Steve and Rumlow looked at the bodies scattered all over the ground in astonishment. Although shooting incidents in the United States are no longer a new thing, there are rarely such large-scale scenes. It seems that they should have provoked a strong opponent. Rumlow looked at the bodies on the ground. Most of them were shot in the head accurately, or shot through the heart. The opponent's shooting skills were very superb. Steve frowned and walked down the corridor to the middle of the warehouse. A group of armed agents raised their guns and formed a circle. Inside, all the people of the Juarez family were disarmed and squatted on the ground with their heads in their arms. Have they all been caught? Steve asked Natasha, who was carrying out the arrest operation. Natasha nodded. Everyone in the warehouse is here. According to them, a group of people just robbed here. Steve glanced at several people and said sternly, who is the person in charge here? The bearded man raised his head tremblingly, his eyes dodging, not daring to look at Steve. Where are the 2 boxes of BU-26 and BU-27? Steve asked. Just robbed. The bearded man pointed to the corpses in the corridor above. They also killed a lot of us. Steve's face sank. If we were a step late, Fury's intelligence department could all go on vacation. It takes 3 days to check a warehouse, and the efficiency is not even as good as a group of robbers. These guys have so many people and weapons, but they can't stop a few people. Rumlow on the side said with a cold face, hurry up and arrange people to guard the entrances and exits of New York. The batch of goods cannot flow out. Natasha shook her head helplessly and said, "It's too late. This is a suburb. With such a long time, they may have left the city long ago. The delay in intelligence is Nick Fury's business. Let him deal with the troubles later." Natasha said, taking out a hard drive and said, "This is the surveillance video around the warehouse. How do I use it?" Steve took the hard drive and looked at it again and again with embarrassment. "There is a computer in the car, go to the car to watch it." Natasha saw the embarrassment on Steve's face, took the hard drive and took the two of them into the car. These surveillance cameras are located around the warehouse, but because it was too dark, the images captured were very blurry. It's not very clear, so it may need to be processed by the technical department. Natasha stared at the surveillance screen, frowning, but judging from the number of people and their general appearance, they should be the people from the port. Steve nodded, staring at the blurred face that looked old in the screen, lost in thought. At the same time, Logan and his friends were driving on the highway outside New York City, quickly returning to Texas. Chris had already arranged all the checkpoints on their way, and the trucks were unimpeded along the way. The highway was silent late at night, and Logan's truck was traveling alone in the endless darkness. Poor Conrad. Samuel drove the car and sighed regretfully, although he had a bad temper. "I didn't expect this guy to die like this, and there was not even a body to be buried." Logan turned his head to look at Samuel, and it could be seen that his regret was indeed sincere. "Does he have a family?" Logan asked. "As far as I know, no, I have never seen him talk to his family on the phone or send messages." Samuel sighed again. Logan stopped talking and sighed helplessly. Although Conrad's death was caused by him, he had to show some regret now. Because he saw Josh in the back seat staring at him through the rearview mirror. This guy might have doubted himself in his heart. After a few minutes of silence, Logan suddenly said, "The money for this mission will be used as his funeral expenses. Find a pastor for him." Samuel nodded silently. No words along the way. The three of them took turns driving, almost without any rest, and finally returned to San Antonio in the afternoon of the second day, back to the logistics warehouse of the Lawrence family. Chris, who learned the news, was waiting at the door of the warehouse, looking forward to Logan and others moving the cargo box out of the car. "Is it all here?" Chris knocked on the cargo box excitedly and waved to Logan, "Open it." Logan used a crowbar to pry open the three locks outside the alley, opened the cargo box shell, and inside was a silver white iron box wrapped in film. He tore off the film, opened the buckle of the box, and opened the box. The things inside made him stunned. A broken laser gun that was completely incompatible with the luxurious silver white box, with many obvious gaps on the gun body, as if it had just experienced a war. Not bad. Chris did not feel strange because of the damage to the laser gun. Instead, his eyes were shining with praise, and he couldn't help but reach out to pick up the gun. The heavy laser gun made him use both hands to lift it up and stroke the gun. At the same time, he noticed that Logan's eyes were always focused on the gun body, which made the originally excited Chris show a little displeasure. "Okay, the mission is completed, everyone retreat, the money will be transferred to your account later." "Yeah," Logan nodded, but his frown could not be opened for a long time. He recognized the gun. It was a weapon left by the Chitauri in the New York War. Although it was a little worn, the functions should have been retained. This is a product that far exceeds the technology of Earth, and its power is probably stronger than any firearm on Earth. Only then did Logan understand why Shield and Steve appeared at the port to compete with them for this batch of goods. Obviously, they did not want to see this batch of goods spread out. It seems that the Lawrence family can't stay. On the way back, Logan was a little uneasy. Now it seems that the ambition of the Lawrence family is greater than he thought. He has to get out as soon as possible, otherwise he may be involved in an unnecessary war. Thinking about it, Logan suddenly became energetic. That's right, thermal vision. He thought of his new ability. He had been on the road before, and he didn't have time to study it in depth. Now it seems that the special reward mentioned when the new ability was awakened before is to let him gain new abilities. In an instant, the worry on Logan's face eased a little. For him, it is undoubtedly a great thing. After all, the self-healing factor and steel claws are not enough for him to support the entire tribe. Endurance 6. Strength 7. Agility 7. Speed 7. Intelligence 5. Defense 7. Willpower 10. Fighting skills 7. Prestige 10. Special attributes none. Special abilities self-healing factor, thermal vision. Current physical condition gradually stable, poor condition. Free points 3. Enhancement points 1. Back in the room of the abandoned factory, Logan looked at the panel in silence. Killing Conrad, a potential threat, in addition to gaining new abilities, also increased the free points by 3 and the enhancement points by 1. Logan looked at the data on the panel and was not in a hurry to use his own points. The current situation is no longer calm, and God knows what kind of situation he will encounter one day. Keep these free points, and when the critical moment comes, choose to use them in areas that need strengthening. In addition to these points, Logan also noticed the column of current physical condition. His physical condition was gradually declining before, and his condition was poor. Although his current condition is still poor, the decline seems to have improved and gradually stabilized. After the self-healing factor is strengthened, it subtly makes up for the loss of his body for many years, allowing his body functions to gradually recover. But it has not yet completely offset the damage caused by the adamantium alloy. It seems that the enhancement of self-healing ability has an effect. Logan breathed a long sigh of relief. For him now, self-healing ability is the most important. Without self-healing ability, he is simply unable to withstand any serious injuries, and he can't make his old body young again. Only by completely restoring his self-healing ability can he avoid the threat of death. Thinking of this, Logan added all the enhancement points to the self-healing factor without hesitation. He must restore all the self-healing factors as soon as possible and get rid of this weak and old body. After adding the points, Logan looked at the new ability curiously. Heat vision. High temperature energy heat vision sounds ordinary, but you have to know that it can easily penetrate any material. In the Silver Age Superman, he can even use heat vision to easily penetrate a planet. Thinking of this, Logan couldn't help but look forward to it. He didn't expect his heat vision to be as powerful as the Silver Age Superman, but he also hoped that it wouldn't be too weak. Thinking of this, Logan held his breath and focused his attention, staring at a point on the table. Buzz. A violent energy suddenly gathered in his eyes, and there was a faint fire in the depths of his eyes. As Logan deepened his attention, the fire gradually turned red, and the dark pupils seemed to be burning with raging flames, and the high temperature permeated, and the hot temperature made the whole room extremely dull. Boom! Suddenly, 2 hot red beams burst out from his eyes, like 2 lasers. Bang! The beam instantly penetrated the tabletop. The long steel table was like tofu and had no resistance. A coin-sized hole was left on the tabletop. The surrounding steel was red, as if it had been burned by red flames. The huge impact force made the entire table tremble continuously, and the wall was shaking. The wall, which was not strong to begin with, fell off a large piece, and a lot of dust was scattered. Logan, what are you doing? Caliban next door shouted impatiently. I was just about to fall asleep. It's okay. Logan responded loudly. I just accidentally hit the table. After saying that, Logan's eyes returned to the hole on the tabletop again, and his face was full of excitement. He stretched out his finger and touched the hole curiously. However, as soon as his hand touched the hole, it was instantly bounced off by the intense high temperature, leaving a very clear burn mark on his finger. Logan looked at the burn mark on his fingertips, not only without any anger, but full of excitement. It may not be as good as Scott's Cyclops now, but it's enough. Logan touched the hot corners of his eyes, and Scott came to his mind. If that guy was here, he would be shocked. But he didn't use the full power of thermal vision just now. The thermal vision is mainly high-temperature energy rays. According to the setting of Silver Superman, the highest temperature it can explode is even comparable to the high temperature generated by the Big Bang. That is the highest temperature ever seen in the universe. Compared with it, the temperature of the sun is as small as a candle. And thermal vision can be controlled by the mind, and the user can adjust the intensity and direction of thermal vision at will. Of course, Logan's thermal vision is not so terrifying now. Thermal vision enhanced. The 3 words, enhanced, indicate that his current thermal vision is only the most basic form. This newly awakened ability, like the self-healing factor, can be continuously strengthened through strengthening, but it is not clear whether there is an upper limit. And the way to strengthen is the same as the self-healing factor, both require the use of enhancement points. If he could completely strengthen his thermal vision, then perhaps he could really unleash a terrifying power comparable to that of Super Silver. However, Logan also knew that if he wanted to strengthen his thermal vision to its final form, the number of enhancement points required would probably be an astronomical figure. At this stage, it is a bit far away for him, and the prestige he has gained in the past few days is also very little. Logan took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. After this incident, he also figured out the way to obtain new abilities. He only needs to get a certain amount of prestige to trigger the awakening of new abilities. In other words, as long as the prestige is enough, the abilities will be more. It seems that we have to find a way to get more prestige. A light flashed in Logan's eyes, and his idea of rebuilding mutants was stronger than ever. After all, it was explained before that the prestige obtained from mutants is twice that of ordinary people. Only in the tribe can he gain more prestige faster. While thinking in his mind, Logan suddenly noticed the burn marks on his fingertips, which had begun to recover unknowingly. Although it was not completely recovered, a thick layer of scab formed. You must know that this is a burn. Generally, burns will first blister and then gradually scab. But now, only a few minutes have passed, and the burn wound has formed a scab. As he stroked the scab on his fingertips, Logan's mouth curled up. This showed that his self-healing ability had recovered to some extent. Although it was not as fast as the recovery speed in his heyday, Logan had never thought that the self-healing factor would be restored before. This was a good start. As long as he was given enough time, the self-healing factor would be able to completely recover to its peak state. Even beyond the peak state, because the enhancement was unlimited, it meant that as long as he had time, he could enhance it infinitely. In the factory area beside the railway tracks, the iron wall leaked cracks, and the dust and sand that passed by from time to time swept outside the iron wall, making a tinkling sound. The old electric fan in the living room squeaked non-stop. Logan sat in front of the table, measuring the hole in the iron table and trying to repair it with the wood on the table. Logan, how did you break it? Caliban squatted down and watched Logan's movements, and couldn't help asking, also, how did you do this? The thickness of the iron table is not small. To make such a hole, at least a large caliber rifle is needed to shoot it. Of course, Logan's steel claws are also capable of punching through the table, but the shape of the hole is a regular circle, not a claw mark, which is obviously not the masterpiece of the steel claws. Logan hesitated a little, considering whether to tell Caliban about his new ability. It seems that Logan has something to say to us. Charles Xavier, who was watching TV, noticed Logan's hesitation and pushed the wheelchair over with interest. Logan looked at the professor hesitantly. Before he could speak, Caliban on the side shouted excitedly, "Great, Logan, are you finally going to leave this place?" Caliban wanted to leave this place even in his dreams. Not to mention that the high-temperature environment of the desert with long-term ultraviolet rays made him suffer. More importantly, he thought he still had value and the remaining decades of his life could not be wasted here. No, Logan shook his head decisively. He wanted to leave, but now was not the time. That's so disappointing. Caliban felt lost and sat down on the chair helplessly, playing with the wooden block that Logan used to repair the table. Logan ignored the lost Caliban, pondered for a moment and finally said, "I have awakened a new ability." He decided to tell the professor and Caliban that he had awakened his thermal vision. Although the awakening of thermal vision should not be revealed to others, after all, it is a killer move that can turn the tide of the battle in a critical moment. But in the past few years, Logan and Professor Caliban have been dependent on each other, like close relatives. No one in the world is more trustworthy than them. What? The professor and Caliban were stunned at first, staring at Logan. This is impossible. Logan, you are 200 years old, and you are long past the age of awakening your abilities. Caliban looked Logan up and down, shook his head and said, "I used to be a black market merchant and saw many mutants, but I have never seen anyone in a nursing home awaken mutant abilities." Logan didn't speak. His eyes gradually became hot and his pupils radiated red. The next second, a blazing beam of light flashed out, and the stuffy room was instantly covered with high temperature. Bang! The beam easily penetrated the table, and an identical small hole appeared next to the hole that had not been repaired. Snap! The wood that Caliban was playing with fell to the ground with a clang, and his pale face was full of disbelief, staring at the newly added hole on the table in amazement. He opened his mouth wide and said, "Scott's Cyclops." "No, Cyclops are not like this. Logan, what is your ability?" "Heat vision." Logan responded truthfully, relying on the eyes to emit high-temperature lasers. "If you use it with all your strength, it will be stronger than it is now." "Oh my God." Caliban touched his bald forehead, looked at the professor beside him and asked, "Professor, is this normal?" Charles stared at the hole on the table, and said in silence for a while, "Theoretically, it is possible, but this is the first time I have seen it. I also think it is a pleasant surprise." Logan knew that no one in the world knew the X gene better than the professor, and his life revolved around the X gene. However, the professor has studied the X gene for many years, and has seen countless mutants and many various cases at Xavier World Academy, but there has never been any case like Logan, who can awaken new abilities at the age of 200. Most mutants awaken their mutant abilities when they are teenagers or young adults. The younger they are, the higher the chance of awakening. As they age, the chance of awakening decreases year by year. However, Logan is the only one who awakens new abilities in old age. "I just awakened recently, and I have only used it twice so far." Logan told the two truthfully. Charles looked at Logan and fell into deep thought for a long time before speaking again. "Maybe your mentality has changed recently, stimulating the potential in your body, so you awakened this new ability." Logan was a little confused before, and even had the idea of committing suicide more than once. Charles knew that he always carried an adamantium bullet that could end his life. But in the last conversation in the water tower, Charles noticed the change in Logan's thoughts. He even proposed the idea of looking for a gathering place for mutants, which shows that his mentality is changing. And the abilities of mutants are mostly related to emotions. Emotions stimulate the potential in genes, thereby inducing the awakening of mutant abilities. It is very likely that after Logan's mentality changed, his emotions also changed, so he has the new ability now. Although this idea is a bit far-fetched, Charles feels that this is the only reasonable explanation for Logan's awakening of new abilities. "By the way, you haven't told anyone about this." Charles stared at Logan seriously. "No." Logan shook his head. "You are the only two people who know about my awakening of new abilities." "That's good." Charles breathed a sigh of relief, and then said with a serious expression, "This matter must not be known to outsiders." As he spoke, he turned to look at Caliban. Caliban nodded in understanding. Logan also asked the professor to relax. "Don't worry, I will hide it well." He was still able to awaken new abilities at the age of 200. If word spread about this, it would definitely make the biologists in white coats in the laboratory go crazy. At that time, countless forces will immediately surround this broken factory area, and even a drop of his blood will be frantically studied by the group of biologists like a treasure. Ding dong. The cell phone beside the table suddenly buzzed with a message alert. An unread text message appears on the screen. "Nurse, when can we see you?" This was Gabriella, and Logan gave her a codename just in case. Logan picked up the phone and replied, "In a few days, now is not the time." After sending the text message, Logan turned off the screen and his expression gradually became serious. After helping Chris complete 2 tasks, he had enough money to leave Santa Fe City. Perhaps, it's time to think about how to get rid of the Lawrence family and Donald. At the same time, in a very shabby cheap hotel. Logan. "In a few days, now is not the time." Gabriella looked at the text message on the screen and anxiously grabbed the phone with both hands. She has been staying in this hotel for several days. She has to be wary of the strange faces around her every day. Her mind is always in a state of tension. She even dares not sleep too much. This kind of life makes her look exhausted. At this time, a red ball rolled to his feet, and then a young white hand stretched out and picked up the red ball. The girl squatted on the ground and raised her head, holding a comic in her other hand. The cover showed Wolverine taking several children in a paradise. She stood up and pointed to the comic. "When will we go to the Garden of Eden?" Gabriella tried her best to put some tenderness on her exhausted face, and reached out to touch the girl's hair. "You have to wait a few more days, and Wolverine will take you there by then." That hero. Laura touched Wolverine in the comics. In the picture, Wolverine is standing on a boulder, wearing a classic yellow suit. His eyes are full of bravery without fear of danger, and sharp claws extend from the clenched fists, scattering metal. The silver shines brightly, and the majestic body is like a warrior who dares to fight against everything. Gabriella smiled and nodded, but her eyes gradually dimmed. That hero. Maybe it was once. She wasn't sure whether the current Wolverine still had the same bloodiness as before. It had been a full week since she came here and contacted Wolverine, but he still refused to meet, and even the content of the text message reply was more like a malicious tease. This forced her to think carefully about whether Wolverine was really reliable. Maybe he was not as great as the comics said. And during this period, she also found out from other Uber drivers that James was now a heavy drinker, and his violent temper even made it difficult for him to make a friend with whom he could drink. Perhaps, the former Wolverine has grown old. Now he is just an Uber driver with no hope in life. Maybe his request for help was just for fun while he was drunk. More than 110,000. Logan checked his bill balance on his phone. During this period of time, he has done two things for the Lawrence family. Although the Lawrence family has a bad reputation outside, they have never been vague about paying. Not long after returning home yesterday, the mission reward of 100,000 arrived. Adding the first reward, excluding the recent expenses, there are more than 110,000 left in the card. This money is enough for him to take the professor and Caliban away from Santa Fe City, and even maintain a relatively good living condition during the escape. Putting down the phone, Logan sat on the sofa and began to think about getting rid of the Lawrence family. After the last direct conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D., Logan believed that with the ability of S.H.I.E.L.D., it might have locked the Lawrence family as the culprit of the robbery of the laser gun. In the near future, S.H.I.E.L.D. may even send agents to Santa Fe City to search for detailed information about the Lawrence family. In addition, Donald, who also stayed in Santa Fe, was also a force that could not be underestimated. This small Santa Fe City might usher in a big scene of a three-way fight. Before this happened, he had to find a way to leave quickly. He didn't want to be involved in this storm. And if he wanted to leave, the most important thing was to withdraw all the money in the bank card. After all, once the escape life officially started, the bank card would definitely not be used anymore, otherwise anyone could easily lock his location by checking the flow address of his bank card. Before that, there were two thorny problems in front of Logan. How to get rid of the Lawrence family. The second was how to help Laura get rid of Donald's pursuit. The former was relatively easy. Although the Lawrence family's power in Santa Fe was extremely large, it was limited to Santa Fe. Once Logan and his team left Texas, the influence of the Lawrence family would become very limited. As long as he acted quickly enough, before the Lawrence family could react, he could take the professor and Caliban out of Texas, and the risk factor would be much lower. As for the latter, that is the real trouble. Donald attaches great importance to Laura, and they have the support of the government. As long as Laura's location is found, he can mobilize heavy troops no matter which state she is in. This is a big trouble. Logan lay on the sofa, looking at the dilapidated ceiling and thinking. Of course, he can also choose to give up Laura. Now Donald's eyes are on Laura. As long as he doesn't take action and lets him catch Laura, there will naturally be no trouble later. But this is obviously impossible. First, Laura has his genes and is considered his flesh and blood. Second, Laura knows many new generation mutants. He wants to organize a mutant group and gain more prestige in the tribe, so these new generation mutants will inevitably join. And this also indicates that he and Donald will fall into a situation of life and death. Ding ding ding. Just when Logan didn't know what to do, the phone rang with a rapid incoming call reminder, completely interrupting his thoughts. Hello. Logan answered the phone. Logan, do you have time? There is a new task. Let's meet at the logistics warehouse. Chris' voice came from the other end of the phone. Logan's body shuddered, and he sat on the sofa with a frown. I just rested for half a day. No way, Chris said with a smile. You also know that the opportunity to make money is fleeting. Okay, Logan was a little helpless, but he had to accept it. Now he was not ready to completely tear his face with the Lawrence family. He asked helplessly, what task? You go to the logistics warehouse first, Samuel and the others are also rushing there, and there will be arrangements when you get there." After speaking, Chris hung up the phone. Logan looked at the phone, sighed helplessly, and got up to go to the logistics warehouse of the Lawrence family. At the door of the warehouse, Logan did not see Chris, but saw Joshua and Samuel. There was a black man in charge of reception next to them, and 2 trucks with the Lawrence family logo. "James, this way." Samuel waved to Logan. Logan came in front of him, glanced at the black man, and then whispered to Samuel, "What mission? So anxious." "I don't know." Samuel shrugged. "Josh and I had just allocated Conrad's salary when we received a call and rushed over." Chris didn't ask too much about Conrad's death, but the remuneration he should give did not stop because of his death. Logan didn't ask much, but Samuel counted on his fingers and said to himself, "We used part of the money to hold a prayer meeting for him, and invited a priest to complete the ceremony in front of his clothes. The rest was donated to the welfare organization, which was considered to be a good deed for this bad guy. I hope he can suffer less torture in hell." Logan didn't care about the whereabouts of the money, and even Samuel and his friends used it for gambling. He still cared about this mission. "Are we still the 3 of us on this mission?" Logan turned his head to look at the black man next to him. The other party was wearing a decent suit and was only responsible for reception. Obviously, he would not participate in the mission personally. Of course not. The one who responded to Logan was not Samuel, but a voice that Logan did not want to hear. "And me, James." Logan frowned and looked over, only to see Donald walking towards them with a smile outside the warehouse door. At this time, the black man beside him also said, "Mr. Chris has ordered that Mr. Donald will also participate in this mission." Logan stared at Donald, who was walking briskly. He knew that this guy must have no good intentions, so he turned his head to the black man and said, "Can I refuse? Chris always arranges some dangerous tasks, and I'm worried that this guy will drag us down." "No." The black man shook his head decisively and explained, "This mission is fully funded by Mr. Donald, and you need to cooperate with any of his actions." Logan understood that Donald was the sponsor of this mission. At this time, Donald also walked up to Logan and smiled, "Hey, James, don't underestimate me, my strength is also good." Logan glanced at him, had to nod his head in agreement, and then followed Samuel to the first truck, opened the door and sat down. However, before Samuel started the truck, Donald came up and pulled Samuel down, saying, "Hey, man, you have to take the one at the back." After that, he sat in the driver's seat. Samuel had no choice. After all, the other party was the sponsor, so he had to get on the truck at the back. "What do you want to do?" Logan looked at Donald, who started the truck, frowning. "Don't be nervous, just taking something that should belong to us, it's legal and compliant." Donald showed a harmless smile, stuck his head out of the window, patted the door, and shouted to the back, "You two, let's go." The truck drove along the road between the rice fields, and the golden wheat ears were filled with the fragrance of rice. The warm afternoon breeze blew and spread the fragrance. In the past, Logan liked the comfort of noon the most. If there was nothing important, he would slow down the car, open the window, and let the warm wind pass by, filling the car with fragrance. But now he had nothing on his mind. He looked at Donald driving the truck next to him with wary eyes. "What on earth do you want to do?" "Logan, calm down, I'm just going to get something." Donald glanced at Logan, with a brisk look on his face, and suddenly asked, "You haven't contacted Gabriella, have you?" Logan noticed Donald's gaze looking over and said coldly, "Oh, your people have been staring at you, do I dare?" Since Donald is cooperating with the Lawrence family, Logan believes that his address may have already been grasped by him. Maybe now, there are still many pairs of eyes watching around the abandoned factory. Better not lie. Donald smiled again and lowered his head to look at Logan's hands curiously. "Can you still stretch out your claws?" Whoops. Logan suddenly raised his hand, and the steel claws between his finger bones suddenly popped out. The silver-white steel claws reflected a dazzling cold light in the sun. But, only half of it. Donald looked at the half-steel claw and then looked at Logan's expression. He could see that this was already the limit of Logan's strength, and the steel claws could no longer stretch and retract as freely as they did when he was young. Looking at this scene, Donald suddenly laughed and said, "When you reach middle age, you will inevitably feel a little powerless, right?" If it were the young Logan, not many people would be willing to mess with him, and no one would want to be an enemy of a guy like that who would never die. As for now, Donald looked at the steel claw and let out a light chuckle. Just a dying old guy. Donald stopped talking, retracted his gaze, continued to look at the road ahead, and even hummed a light song. Logan smiled helplessly and said nothing. He retracted his claws and turned to look at the rice fields passing by outside the car window. Their destination this time was Florida. Like Santa Fe, it was located in the southern United States. The weather was similar to San Antonio. It didn't look like autumn at all, and there was a dull heat in the air. When we arrived at our destination, it was already the morning of the next day. This is a small town in Yanbian, Florida. The town is surrounded by dense trees, and the roads are lined with green woods. The traffic in the town is very bad, and most of them are dirt roads with potholes. Such roads are definitely a challenge for the shock absorbers of the trucks, and also for the people in the cars. The bumps along the way make them feel like their bodies are about to fall apart. It's time to change cars. Donald stepped out of the truck and said to Samuel and Joshua, who were following behind him, "The road ahead is difficult for trucks to pass. There is a rental point for off-road motorcycles nearby." Samuel kept rubbing his feet against a stone, trying to wipe off the yellow mud stuck to the soles of his shoes, and couldn't help but complain, "Is this place a primitive tribe? There is not even a cement road. Boy, I advise you to shut up." Donald patted Samuel on the back and reminded, "This is the territory of rednecks." Logan scanned the surroundings vigilantly. There was only a potholed dirt road with dense jungle on both sides. "Let's go and get going early while it's daylight." Logan looked at the sky. He didn't want to camp out in this unfamiliar place. It seems James can't wait any longer. Donald squinted his eyes and looked at the long dirt road, smiling expectantly. "I can't wait to see those goods." Logan suddenly frowned. Donald's expression gave him a bad feeling. Led by Donald, several people found a rental shop full of mountain motorcycles at the corner of the road ahead, and rented 4 mountain motorcycles at relatively expensive prices. Then, the roar of motorcycles rang through the woods. There were no signs here, but Donald was obviously very familiar with this area. He twisted the accelerator, let the motorcycle engine roar, and moved quickly through the woods. The 3 of them had to speed up and weave through the trees. After nearly half an hour, Donald slowed down and finally stopped in front of a clearing deep in the woods. There is a large closed house standing in the open space. Apart from the front door, this house has no entrances or exits. Even the windows on the house are sealed floor-to-ceiling windows. Logan squinted at the house. He could see that the house was not designed to be lived in, but a secret laboratory hidden deep in the jungle. However, it seems that it has stopped functioning. All the outer walls have fallen off. Thick grass almost surrounds the entire laboratory. Some plants that need to be climbed are climbing up along the laboratory, occupying almost an entire body. There was no sound at all, and there wasn't even an extra human figure around. What fool builds his house in such a horrible place? Is there anything wrong with his brain? Samuel looked at the laboratory and complained again. The rush all the way made him feel a little irritable. However, Joshua saw that this laboratory was definitely unusual. He reached out and poked Samuel's back, and reminded him in a low voice, "Say less." Logan turned to look at Donald, his brows furrowed. "What exactly do you want us to bring? This place is not simple at first glance. Although it is dilapidated, there may still be many secrets inside." Donald laughed. "You will know when you go in." After that, he strode towards the door of the laboratory. After the baptism of wind and rain, the door was covered with rust, and the lock on the door was almost a decoration. Bang! Donald suddenly kicked the big iron door open with a fierce kick. The door lock broke with a sound, and the rusty door frame fell straight back, raising dust. "Follow me." Donald waved his hand to signal several people to follow, and strode into the laboratory. The silent and dim laboratory was filled with a rotten smell, and the ground was covered with a thick layer of dust. There were sealed rooms on both sides, and it was impossible to see what was hidden inside. Donald seemed to be very familiar with this place. Even though the environment was very dim, he still led Logan and others to a room with ease. The iron door outside the room was also overturned by his foot. Inside were sealed iron cages made of steel sheets. Logan looked at the cages with a frown. So many cages. Samuel approached an iron cage and took a closer look. The thick iron cage looked like a bank safe. What animals are these cages used to hold? He turned his head and asked Donald curiously. Animals. Donald squinted at Logan, then suddenly grinned, stretched out his hand and pressed the switch next to him. Boom. The lights were instantly powered on, and the dazzling light illuminated the entire room. The walls of the room were covered with photos of various people, each of them in different shapes. Some were no different from normal people, while others retained some animal characteristics. The experiment numbers were noted next to the photos: number 7, number 19, number 21. Donald looked at the photos, squinted his eyes and murmured, "Aren't mutants animals?" With rows of neatly arranged cages and various experimental data hanging on the walls, Logan could even imagine the wailing of his fellow humans in the cages before they died when this place was still in operation. In this laboratory, mutants are just a group of animals that are not much different from pigs, cows, dogs and sheep. Logan's fists clenched unconsciously. He didn't expect that the goods Donald mentioned would be mutant experimental samples. Mutants are truly complex creatures. Samuel bent down and stared carefully at a cage. Through the gap in the cage, he could see that the cage was empty. He turned back and asked Donald, "But, isn't it a crime to carry out experimental transformation of human beings?" From the information on the wall, he could tell that various experiments had been conducted on mutants here. But he had no feelings for mutants. Humans living in a new era. These three words mutants, they sound more like mysterious creatures from the last century. In addition, the government deliberately erases information about mutants in an attempt to make the world forget the fact that they once saved the world. Therefore, young people like Samuel know very little about mutants and are psychologically indifferent. If you hate it, you won't care. So they were far less shocked than Logan was about using mutants to study this matter. "It's legal," Donald spoke with a smile, and at the same time glanced at Logan's gloomy face, his eyes filled with amusement. "Okay. Where is the goods? Get them and leave as soon as possible. I don't want to spend the night here. Maybe there will be ghosts of mutants at night." Chow Shear asked. The surrounding environment made him feel a little creepy. He could guess that countless mutants must have been killed here, and judging from the photos on the wall, there seemed to be some small mutants among them. "Follow me." Donald smiled, walked to a wall, stretched out his hand and knocked on the wall. The hollow echo showed that there was a hole behind the wall. He used both hands to open the wall and create a deep passage. Dust continued to scatter, and a rotten smell spread from inside. Generally, the experimental subjects or samples outside are just for children, and they are not worth much at all. Bringing them back is not even enough to cover the travel expenses. Donald smiled and pointed to the passage. "The highlight is at the very end." "What do you mean?" Samuel looked at the passage with a puzzled look on his face. Logan remained silent. He knew that Donald was deliberately mocking the cheapness of mutants. The value of some mutants was not even as much as the cost of gas. He also secretly said that mutants are just a group of things that can be measured by price and are not worthy of being compared with humans. Logan knew that this was Donald's nature. He loved poking people where they hurt and making them look ugly, and he took pleasure in doing so. Several people walked through the narrow passage and came to a more secretive laboratory. Donald turned on the light, and the dim laboratory was instantly illuminated by strong light. What came into view were 24 iron boxes. In 22 of them, through the gaps, people could be vaguely seen lying inside. Corpse. Samuel lowered his head and looked carefully at a gap, and suddenly jumped up in fright. He was not afraid of dead people, but these shocking rows of mutant corpses really made him feel a little frightened. It really feels like déjà vu in Resident Evil. "Don't be afraid." Donald walked towards the depths and said with a smile, "They can no longer threaten us." After speaking, he pointed to the few iron boxes at the back and said, "The first few are not important, the last ones are the highlight." This first one only had the characteristics of a mutant. He was covered in wolf hair, but he didn't have any superpowers. He was a failed experiment and was executed. Donald smiled and patted the first iron box, then pointed to the second one. The second one made a little progress and restored the mutant's abilities, but it's a pity that his cells divided too fast, and his organs were destroyed alive, worn out. "This is the third one." Donald walked to the third iron box and said with regret, he almost succeeded and reproduced all the abilities of mutants. Unfortunately, his willpower was too weak and he couldn't bear the metal poured into him, so he died in the experiment. On stage, Samuel and Josh frowned unconsciously, and Donald spoke of death too easily. This is too cruel. Samuel couldn't help but raise doubts. These methods of death were a bit difficult for normal people to accept, and judging from the appearance of these corpses, they seemed to be young. Donald smiled, shook his head and said, "There is no need to feel bad about the death of the mice. They are just experimental subjects. The only purpose of their birth is to allow us to record data." So, the experiment was successful and this place was abandoned. Chow Shear couldn't help but ask. Donald thought for a moment and smiled. "Pretty much, we are now at the borderline between success and failure." "What do you mean?" Samuel asked confused. Donald came to the last two boxes. "You should also notice that two boxes here are empty." "What's the meaning?" Samuel ran to the empty box and asked curiously. "They succeeded, so they were not executed." "Yes." Donald pointed to the empty box numbered X24, "There's nothing wrong with it except that it's weak." "What about X23? Samuel looked at another empty box next to him. "She ran away." Donald shook his head with regret. "She is the most successful one. She has copied all the advantages of that mutant, and is even stronger than that mutant in some aspects." After speaking, he suddenly raised his head and continued to smile. "I am looking for her now. It is said that she is in Santa Fe City. If anyone among you can help me find her, I will reward you handsomely." "You have consumed more than 20 experimental subjects." Josh looked back at the rows of boxes behind him and couldn't help asking, "Who do you want to copy?" After the introduction, he could see that the ultimate goal of these experimental subjects seemed to be to copy the ability of a mutant. For this goal, they did not hesitate to kill more than 20 inches people. And obviously, there may be only two who succeeded, or even only one. How special is the object of the copy that will make the laboratory pay so much? "Who?" quote. Donald suddenly smiled, took out a very old-looking blueprint from under an iron box, and gently unfolded it and spread it on the box. The top of the paper read, "Conceptual Anatomy of Wolverine." Below was the anatomical information of a human figure with steel claws, and each organ was marked next to it. Josh put his head over the paper and murmured the name on it, Wolverine. When this name entered his ears, Logan's face suddenly darkened. "Never heard of it." Samuel took his head back and shook his head slowly. At the same time, he couldn't help but look back at the rows of iron boxes behind him, and said again, "But he must be very capable, otherwise he wouldn't be so attractive to you." They did not hesitate to spend more than 20 experimental subjects just to reproduce the abilities of a Wolverine, which shows that the value of Wolverine definitely far exceeds the cost of these experimental subjects. "He used to be as ferocious as a beast." Donald patted Logan on the shoulder and turned to give him a meaningful smile. Logan knew that Donald was deliberately provoking, and he was sure that Logan would not get angry. Indeed, Logan's vital point is now grasped by the other party. Even if this guy is so presumptuous, there is nothing he can do now. But he didn't pay attention to Donald, but stepped forward and put his eyes on the drawing. "It's the drawing from Plan X." Logan recognized this drawing. It was a concept drawing made by scientists when Logan was in the X laboratory. It was also the DNA gene left by Wolverine at that time, which led to the current X23 Luo general pull. "James, don't worry, as long as you find X23, no one will be interested in an old guy." Donald smiled and patted Logan on the shoulder. These words made Joshua and Samuel confused. But Logan knew what this guy meant. Laura's potential in all aspects is actually far greater than that of Wolverine. She is younger, has better statistics, and has greater development prospects. It can be said that she is a more perfect Wolverine. With Laura as a perfect experimental subject, Logan seems less important. After all, no one wants to care about a dying old wolf. Of course, the premise is to find Laura. "Let's go, I've got the things." Donald rolled up the drawing and waved it in his hand. This move made a few people slightly stunned. "Just this drawing?" Samuel looked at the drawing and then at the boxes here. "I thought the target was these boxes." Donald put the drawings into his pocket and said with a contemptuous smile, "Those are just a group of failed experiments and have no use value." "Then why don't you find the three of us? Even a homeless man can help you with such a simple task. Samuel was confused and had no idea what the significance of their trip to accompany Donald was. In case, Donald chuckled and strode towards the door. Let's go, don't worry, you will not be less rewarded. Samuel and Josh looked at each other, feeling that this task was a bit bafflingly simple, but since the sponsor said so, the two of them had no objections and kept up with Donald's pace. Arriving outside the laboratory, Logan and the others were about to get on their motorcycles and leave. Bang! Suddenly, a burst of dazzling white light suddenly hit. The rapid speed made it impossible to see its shape clearly, and the dazzling glare made it impossible to look directly. Get out of the way! Logan's pupils shrank suddenly, and he felt a strong sense of crisis in the white light. He almost subconsciously ducked to the side to avoid it. Pong! The white light hit a motorcycle accurately and exploded like a rocket. The rumbling explosion spread throughout the trees. The 4 motorcycles exploded almost at the same time, and the flames from the exploded fuel tanks swept out. The shock wave made the surrounding trees rustle and leaves scattered in the sky. The silent jungle was awakened instantly, countless birds fled, and the beasts on the ground also fled in a hurry, making bursts of fleeing sounds. I should have thought of a high-paying task, it would never be that simple. Samuel got up from the ground and looked around with cautious eyes. The first time Logan yelled to get out of the way, he hurriedly lay down to avoid the impact of the explosion. Seeing the motorcycle that had been turned into ruins and burning, Samuel felt scared in his heart. If they had gotten on the car just now, they would only be turned into a few exploded corpses. Fortunately, these people were not ordinary people. They immediately lay down to avoid the attack without causing any casualties. Attention alert! Logan stared at the direction of the white light, and his quick ears allowed him to hear the sound of approaching footsteps. He's from Hydra. Donald took out the pistol from his waist, stared intently into the depths of the jungle, and said solemnly, "We are not the only ones who study mutants, those crazy people are also interested in the drawings in my hand." He was very sure of the origin of this group of enemies. After all, those who studied mutants and dared to take the initiative to attack him were most likely Hydra. At this time, a group of heavily armed teams rushed out of the woods. They were well equipped and carried various weapons in their hands. Some even held a Gatling gun, and there was a person who helped him carry ammunition. Chain. These people are extremely fast and block almost all escape routes. Withdraw to the laboratory first. Logan looked at these people and his eyes shrank sharply. If they meet head-on, the pistols of several of them are no match for this group of well-armed people. Donald's eyes were gloomy. He stopped talking and ran towards the laboratory. Samuel and Joshua also felt numb and rushed back to the laboratory desperately. After the last Logan entered the laboratory, he did not forget to prop up the door that had been kicked down by Donald and use a table to block it. The 4 of them were in the laboratory, looking carefully at the enemies outside through the gap in the door. These fully armed enemies quickly surrounded the entire laboratory. It can be seen that this group of guys cooperated very well, holding their weapons and pointing them in all directions of the laboratory. No matter where they escaped from, they would be shot into sieves in the first time. Get out! A black man stood out from the crowd. His tall body made him very eye-catching in the crowd. His sturdy figure was like a standing brown bear. Moreover, he did not carry any weapons. Except for the bulletproof vest on his body, no guns could be seen at all. This seemed out of place in a fully armed team. He stared at the laboratory and shouted, and his rough voice kept echoing in the jungle. This smell! Logan stood in the laboratory, raised his head slightly and sniffed, and his expression suddenly changed. There is a mutant among them. The movement just now must have been caused by them. He noticed something was wrong from the attack just now. The ball of white light was neither a bullet, nor a rocket, nor a grenade, but it could easily destroy 4 motorcycles. This must be some strange means. Now he can clearly smell the smell of the tribe drifting outside, which further confirms the idea that there are similar people outside. You can smell this. Samuel looked at Logan's actions with a look of astonishment, and couldn't help but look up and sniff, but he couldn't smell anything except the rotten smell in the laboratory. Buzz! Before they could discuss more, the black man outside suddenly raised his hand. A sharp buzzing sound came, and the white light gathered in the black man's hand. The dazzling light was simply impossible to look directly at, and the terrifying energy in the white light made everyone feel horrified. At this moment, the space was trembling because of this terrifying energy, and the environment even had ripples. Whoosh! The black man waved hard, and the white light flew out instantly and hit the door. Bang! The violent explosion spread out instantly, and the whole laboratory shook violently in the explosion. The old and dilapidated building seemed to collapse at any time in the explosion, and the wall skin kept falling off, and dust filled the air. The heavy iron door at the entrance was broken immediately, and the huge door frame was like a crumpled roll of paper, completely collapsed. The shock wave of the explosion also blew the surrounding trees away for a long time. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.